Hello and welcome to Syndicate Gaming. We are a new YouTube channel founded by myself, Jim, my buddy John, and my brother Bobby. We're three nerds that play miniatures games, card games, pretty much every game you can think of. We play them all. But my name is Jim, and I've been playing Marvel Crisis Protocol for about 3 years since the X-Men came out, which I feel like is when most people started playing. Uh, and today we're going to be talking about the Criminal Syndicate in our very first video because that's personally my favorite team. But I'm going to pass the basketball here to John to let him talk about himself a little bit. So go ahead, John.
Yeah. So not quite as experienced as Jim, but I've been playing for like 7 months now, 8 months. Um, Only been to a handful of in-person games, but enjoying the TTS leagues. Mostly a Guardians player, so criminals are pretty new for me, so I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah, I'm Bobby. I'm Jim's older brother, and he got me into the game like a year and a half ago. Uh, I have enjoyed playing in different tournaments and uh, just learning the game. It's a great game. So, Criminal Syndicate's one of my favorite affiliations as well, which is why we decided to make a tier list for them first.
Yeah, we've all been to some tournaments. We all play in the TTS leagues. Uh, Bobby actually made the cut last season, which was really impressive. That was awesome, Bob. So congrats on that.
Yeah, it was a
That
good
was
run. It was with Criminal Syndicate, so
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Um, and then in September, we're all going to be going to the Nova Open, which Bobby and I went there last year. We did really well. Hoping to take it home this year, probably with Criminal Syndicate, if we're being honest. John on his trusty Guardians. But yeah, so our first video on the channel is going to be a Criminal Syndicate tier list. So just to break down what we're doing, uh, you know, we've all seen the other tier lists that, other channels have made. And we were thinking about it and we were like, we should really rank each character for their own affiliations because that's where they're going to be taken the most often. And that's really, where they shine, hopefully, or maybe not shine based on who we're talking about. But our long-term plan for the channel is to do a tier list for like each team and then potentially do a massive tier list where every character is a splash character, which will be really interesting. But um, so yeah, we're just gonna start with the Criminal Syndicate characters, jump over to our favorite splash characters that we like to use in our rosters, and then finally we will wrap up with the tactics cards for Criminal Syndicate and each of the characters' own specific tactics cards that we like to see. So, yeah, I think we're gonna jump right into it. So, any final thoughts, guys, or like, what's your overall take on Criminal Syndicate? Like, where do they stand? Are they competitive? Not competitive, more fun. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, just as a fairly new player and one that's mostly been attrition focused through Guardians, they've always seemed a little big brain for me. Uh, so hopefully we can demystify a little bit of that and see, how things actually work together. Some of these characters.
Why do you think they're big brained?
It's more than just turn one walk up, turn two double tap,
Yeah.
which has been the extent of my strategy. But yeah, the some of the leaderships and some of the game plans surrounding some of these characters are pretty interesting. Just seeing some of those plans come to fruition is just so rewarding.
Yeah, you could say that things have to go all according to plan sometimes.
There it is.
Dang it,
Yeah,
Bobby.
um, yeah, I think criminals are great. I think they're really competitive. Um, I don't know if the community in general thinks of them as tier one, but I think they definitely have the potential to win any tournament you take them to. and they're fun in a more casual game as well. Um, I think turn zero is really hard for them with your roster building, and then even when you pick your squad for a given game. Just with 4 different leaders, some of the leaders have very different styles, which gives them a lot of flexibility, which is great. It means you always have potentially a good plan. It can just be hard to fit 10 characters, into a list, and then on the fly decide which route you're going to go, before a game starts.
Yeah. Criminal Syndicate now has the most leaders in the game, which is pretty shocking to me because for a long time we only had Kingpin, and I love Criminal Syndicate just with Kingpin. And then Shadowland Daredevil came along, completely changed the roster. And then suddenly back to back, we've gotten Modoc, Scientist Supreme, and now Claw is coming out in just a few weeks. So really, like the whole team is like kind of flipped on its head. And there's so many different ways to play them, and that's something we'll really get into here. But I think each character can work under a certain leader. But let's go ahead and start with the very first leader, my favorite character in this whole game. I'm not gonna, you know, beat around the bush here, but I love Kingpin. He's the reason to play Criminal Syndicate, and I think he should be an S tier. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to argue there. He is just kind of a cornerstone of pretty much any roster. So it's I feel like a lot of the time, people are talking about, if you're not splitting with another affiliation in your list, you're just going all syndicate. It's usually, are you taking Kingpin and who? Like you're never going like without Kingpin in a syndicate list, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I feel like if you're building a Criminal Syndicate roster, you should always have Kingpin, even if your primary plan is to play a different leader. Because Kingpin, like, he will just make questions for the other player. They're constantly thinking, like, oh, if I end up on a certain secure, Kingpin is going to be really toxic and dominant. And I have to plan for that. Even if he's just in your 10, you never plan on taking him. That's just a huge impact, in my opinion. What do
For
you
sure.
think, Bob?
Yeah, you know, obviously the reason he's so powerful is his leadership makes your characters count double on secures, which is one of the most powerful leaderships in the game. I also kind of maybe underappreciated is the ability to pass extracts between your characters. It doesn't come up as much, but sometimes you can make some pretty sick plays with that your opponent might not see coming. Like Rhino passing an extract and then stealing one, for example. You know, maybe we should talk briefly about what we think each tier kind of means. I agree for sure. I don't think you make a 10 criminal syndicate list without Kingpin in it. Um, does that make him S tier? I'm not so sure. S tier to me is like the best of the best. You know, you're thinking about bringing them every single game you play. Not even just taking them in your 10, but playing them every time. And Kingpin does have the one glaring weakness of his leadership is much less effective on pay to flips. And then sometimes he's susceptible to control. He's a short mover, doesn't have any action economy. By which I mean, like, he doesn't have a charge or a way to place himself. If he wants to move, he has to spend an action moving. So I do think, if you're playing on Riots or Infinity Formula and your opponent doesn't have a plan for him, I mean, he can just auto win the game sometimes and can definitely feel like an S tier, but it's not always that powerful. So does that make him an A tier character?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Bob. So we should probably talk about how we want to define each category, S through D. And, we could each have our own definitions of each tier. But you are right that Kingpin is very bad in some circumstances. Like sometimes he just feels like dead weight. And if your roster is not built correctly and you're playing, on a crisis that's a pay to flip where his leadership doesn't matter and you have to bring him just because of the threat value or what your crisis is, whatever the reason is. Like there are games where I've brought, my like leader is Shadowland Daredevil, but I needed one more four and I had to bring Kingpin and he just did nothing the whole game. So maybe that does knock him down a tier. Whereas, like, yes, he will probably be in every Criminal Syndicate roster, but he might not be used in every game. So that might bump him down to A. Whereas maybe a character in S is in every roster and you try and play them every game. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I feel like there's very few lists where you're going to take one character every single game. But it is a good, you did raise like just having Kingpin in your list raises some questions for your opponent. Um, so I think if we have someone else that's in our roster every single time, might be A tier, but won't have the same impact even just from the bench that Kingpin would. So I would still argue he would be S tier. Um, if it is a pay to flip or something, maybe you're not raising those questions as much, but there's still a concern there, I guess.
Yeah. He could even throw off the other player picking secures versus their extracts. Like, they might want to pick their secures, but if they're really good for Kingpin, that might change their plan. So maybe we put him at the very top of A, bottom of S. We might need to see where other characters end up and we could move him later. But
Yeah, I think we can put him S tier for now. I think his ability is so unique and he kind of warps the game like no other character does. I think it's deserving of S tier.
yeah, I mean, beyond his leadership, he has really good superpowers and like, his like strike, wild stun, wild push, really good. His spender, hail to the king, 7 dice, 3 power, auto stagger, auto throw. That is so good. Like that is crazy. That has like won me games because there are times where the other player just tries to burn down Kingpin like as fast as they can. So then Kingpin flips from his healthy side to his hurt side, and he has like 7 power, and then he could just do a spender twice, throw 2 characters, stagger 2 characters. Like that has won me games alone. So even beyond his leadership, he has some great tools in his toolbox. But
Oh yeah.
let's put him in S for now. We should probably move on to the next leader, Shadowland Daredevil. So who wants to take him away?
You want to go, John? You're our attrition specialist.
Yes, and I do love me some Daredevil. So Shadowland Daredevil, I don't know if you would call him the opposite of Kingpin necessarily, but he has a much different game plan where he wants to just, rush you with a bunch of ninjas. But he is primarily focused on attrition. He gives you a reroll, I believe, on attacks against characters holding or contesting objectives.
Yep, that's right.
And he gets to reroll a skull, which I think is huge. Um, I probably would have put him in the S tier along with Kingpin before we had other leaders in Syndicate, just because, with just the two leaders, you're probably taking both every single roster. You're kind of again raising those questions of, is my opponent, if depending on secures and extracts, if they're kind of in your favor either way, is my opponent going to go control? Are they going to go attrition? What's their game plan going to be? Now he might have some competition for that attrition game plan in Modoc and Claw. So I'm thinking he's probably falling off a little bit, as much as it pains me to say. So I guess I would probably put him in A tier tentatively.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I think he's really solid. when he came out, he was very popular that TTS season. Was putting up some really good results, especially with Bucky. Range 5, getting 4 rerolls a turn, usually with the rapid fire. And then Malekith came out, who you can't reroll against, and he kind of dropped off the face of the earth for a while. But now you can reroll against Malekith. I think his leadership is one of the best attrition leaderships in the game. He kind of suffers from some of the same weaknesses as Kingpin. Like his only way to move outside of a move action is his range 4 baton snare that moves him short. Yeah, I think he's excellent. I think he is deserving of A tier. You can do a lot of cool things with his ninjas. And he's similar to Kingpin, where his favorite thing is to have a character come to him and try to fight him at close range, and he will often win that fight. He'll probably take more than his 4 threat to beat him in a range 2, slugfest.
Which is just so thematic.
Yeah. You guys rank him higher than I would. I might put a B because he always feels like my second option. Like I know that you could build a whole roster, built around his leadership, like with rapid fire, people making multiple attacks, counterattacks. But whenever I play Shadowland Daredevil, he personally just like struggles for me. Like, he has the great turn 1 plays with the ninja. The ninja can move up and vanish to move a hammer to Modoc or whoever, which is fantastic. But he's just he I don't know. He's kind of like pillow fisted because he just has the rage to, 5 dice strike, that summon the ninjas. And sometimes the ninjas are actually like a liability because they're standing there. They have 1 defense against most attacks, 2 health. So people could just randomly strike them to get in almost guaranteed 2 power, which could be like game changing for them. And like you guys said, Daredevil doesn't have any way to move himself outside of his various attacks, like his baton and his spender. Uh, and he's just always like my second option. Like I'm never really happy to be playing him. Like he is good and he fills in the gaps that Kingpin has, but to me, he's always felt like an anchor dragging down the team. Like his leadership is so good, but then he himself just struggles in a lot of situations. So, what do you guys think of that?
Yeah,
Go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say I do agree with all the points there. We were at a tournament earlier this year, and out of 8 games, your only loss was playing Shadowlands Daredevil.
Mine?
I'm pretty sure. I had a lot more than 1 loss.
Yeah. So, John, John is talking about the Cherokee Open where I played Criminal Syndicate, and I ran Kingpin 7 times and Daredevil once, and on that match that I did play Daredevil, I did win that game because it was on sword
Oh,
base,
right.
but I only took him because I was on a pay to flip, right? So I don't really want to be playing him, but his leadership is really solid, and I'm probably fine with him being an A. But if he didn't have his leadership, I think he's like a C tier character. But obviously we're playing in Criminal Syndicate, so we're gonna have the leadership. But I honestly would not take Shadowland Daredevil under a different criminal leader.
That is a good point.
I think that's all fair. And honestly, before Claw, I would say you're crazy. The flexibility of his attrition is just too good. You're always going to want him as an option. But now with Claw coming out, that is another option for a more attrition focused criminal syndicate leader. And I'm curious to see, is Claw actually the better secondary leader for the affiliation, which, I haven't had a chance to test yet. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, let's leave him in A for now. But let's move on to Modoc Scientist Supreme, who has a wild leadership. Get it? Uh, so I haven't gotten the chance to use Modoc Scientist Supreme too much, but I find him a little lackluster, and the word I would use is awkward. Like he's very slow, and it's possible that his leadership just like never triggers for the entire game. I know that's not very likely, but it is possible where your other leaderships will happen every turn. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure where I'd rank him for the moment.
I think Modoc is a solid. If you're truly thinking just from a competitive standpoint, I think he's a C, honestly. I'm not very high on him.
Oh, that's rough. So, okay, so what does that mean? Like, you would never take his leadership. He's like the worst of the four leaders. Like, what does C mean in this context?
C to me means, he does some things well, there aren't necessarily other characters who are just better than him at what he does. Like he's certainly a decent playable character, and I think you can have fun with him in a game, and he's gonna do good things. But he may not just he has some kind of limitation, where if your goal is to win the game, he might just not be consistent enough compared to other options. That's my feeling of what a C means.
Yeah, I would think C tier. He's not always making your roster. Um, for me, especially with like some of his tactics cards, it's really like you kind of have to set out with in your head. You're thinking, I'm going to play Modoc this game, and I'm going to have a crazy shell game, and I'm just going to have fun with it. Like it's going to be so much like I'm going to go over to Jim's house, and we're just going to have fun. You know. Um, as far as like competitive goes, I mean, he could have a place. Everyone has a place. Um, but yeah, I would lean towards the maybe B if you optimize everyone around him. But there is another Modoc that you can play. That yeah does seem to be a little more consistent in what he offers.
Okay. I'm I'm like so torn on this character because I was so hyped for him to come out, like and I never thought that he'd be like a criminal syndicate leader. And his leadership is cool, and I've like built lists around it with like, Corvus Glaive and like Captain America and Gambit and people like that. But I feel like if we're talking in a competitive sense, his leadership is just not consistent enough to matter. Like I don't think you ever take him as your second option over Shadowland Daredevil. It's like Kingpin and then Shadowland and then Modoc is probably below them. But I would rather take Modoc as a character not being the leader than Shadowland Daredevil. Because he has the range for 5 dice. It could be physical or energy. Wild what is it? Burn. The like
Incinerate, yeah.
yeah. And he has the like short range size 4 throw, but just his short move, yeah. Maybe I'm with you guys and see, which like breaks my heart because I love him, but he's just too chancy.
You
Like,
can you can definitely show some love on the other Modoc.
yeah, I feel like we're bigger fans of OG Modoc, but some ways to really benefit from his leadership is to bring characters with large dice pools because you're more likely to get that wild. And remember that it's only once per turn, so you really want to go all in on one big attack if you really want to maximize the leadership. Um, but yeah, okay, so let's move on to the new kid on the block. He's not even out yet. Claw. I've seen a lot of different viewpoints of him on the internet, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys think.
So this is a pure hot take. I have not played with him at all. Um, 5 threat, his leadership is completely selfish. Just says that he gets to move short when one of your characters is dazed or KO'd by an enemy effect, which is a new thing they brought to the game, which I really like. I love the idea of a leadership that only benefits the character it's on. Um, he's got some really powerful effects. He's got the 6 dice energy attack, range 3. He's got a spender that's a long range beam. And then I think one of the effects that people are most excited about is his sound wave barrier, where when someone ends an activation, I think within range 3 of him, he can push them short.
Yep.
Which just gives him some wild, area control. He heals himself. I think more than anything, he might be a little power hungry to use all of his, great effects that he has. I'm just gonna, take a chance and put him in A tier, and we'll see how it pans out. But I think he looks good.
A tier.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I definitely think A tier. I would say at a minimum. Have like you said, not having played him yet. Not in love with the leadership, but I mean, a 5 threat on his own, I think he offers a lot. I'm just so excited to get the what's his tactics card, the Supersonic Annihilator.
Yeah.
I'm just so ready to get that Area 5 attack on the table because it sounds like so much fun. Just as a 5 threat, not necessarily as a leader. I think he would be great under, another leader. On his own, could be interesting. I guess I could be talked into it once I see it up close. Yeah,
what you say about him, what you say about him being good under another leader, that's one reason I'm excited about him. I feel like him and Kingpin might be better partners than Daredevil and Kingpin. Like, I love the flexibility Criminal Syndicate has with its game plan, but sometimes I really feel like I'm like, here's my 5 Daredevil characters, here's my 5 Kingpin characters, and they don't mesh very well. Whereas Claw, I could definitely see Claw being a great option with Kingpin as a leader. Or you just take Claw if you're on pay to flips,
right.
Which I love that for list building.
Or Claw under Daredevil, and you have that Area 5 attack re-rolling a skull.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like, especially if you are on a pay to flip and everyone's kind of bunched up on the right map, then you just plop him right in the middle and throw that one off.
Yeah, not to mention he has a beam. Maybe we'll be seeing some triple leader lists coming out. What do you think, Jim?
I'm not as sold on Claw as you guys. The only thing that worries me is that he's a 5 threat without any throws or like charges or hit and run or places or anything. So he really wants to just get to a point, stand there and blast you. And once he's there, he is fantastic. Like the 6 dice energy, like stun before damage, right? And that beam is just like ridiculous. But uh from his but his leadership, it's like brand new and I can't wait to try it. So I can't really speak on it, but I could see lists where you just ring Claw, Bullseye, and a bunch of 3 threats and just send everyone in and just hope Claw carries with his like tactics card, the Area 5, and his turning. He will love characters that can move him, like I said. So then his ally can move him, and then he can move off of his own leadership, and he could really get around the board and like push people around and deal a ton of damage. But A is fine for me. I would probably put him B, but we still need to test him out. So, this is a hot take, and that's fine with me. One thing I want to bring up. since we have four leaders that we all generally like and we've talked about bringing them together, what do you guys think of the card Versatile Strategy? Do you think it's worth bringing multiple leaders and then swapping mid-game, like start on Kingpin, switch to a different leader mid-game? Is that something that's viable?
I honestly probably have not tested versatile strategy as much as I should. It I try to imagine situations where it would be nice, and Kingpin, his leadership turns off as characters are dazed. So you can definitely imagine, okay, I have Kingpin initially to get ahead, and then I start getting dazed and I switch to the other leader to close out the game. um, I think the issue is just, like you've mentioned, Jim, taking Kingpin and Daredevil sometimes doesn't feel great because they're both a little clunky. Um, so I think it's almost more just the characters themselves stopping me from wanting to do that versus the leaderships. I think it's a great plan, to try to benefit from both your leaderships. Again, I wonder if Kingpin Claw, maybe it'll be more of an option than it was. Claw's leadership, I think it's going to be better in practice than it seems on paper, because when your opponent is deciding between attacking a full health Claw versus dazing one of your other characters, but they don't want to let him move, that's going to be rough for them, and it might end up almost in practice being like a stagger on a character or something if they decide to move somewhere else to make a better attack that doesn't proc his leadership. It can make some awkward choices for your opponent. But yeah, what do you guys think of versatile strategy?
Well, as a Guardians player, I've never seen this card before in my life. Um,
You only have one leadership.
exactly. I do think Kingpin Claw would be super interesting. We kind of talked about we're not necessarily in love with Claw's leadership, but we'll see how it goes. But if you could switch to that, if you want him to be in the middle, and then that's doing some damage, and then maybe your opponent changes up their game plan and wants to start throwing him around. Maybe once people are starting to get dazed, you switch to that, and just it gives you kind of a safe closer for the game, just to keep him where he wants to be, just to continue firing on everybody. Trying to think of other matchups where this would be nice. I guess it's very, very gameplay dependent. If you were taking Claw and Shadowland Daredevil, that reroll is pretty nice. So I don't know how often you switch between those two, but yeah, I think Kingpin Claw is definitely the one that has me excited there.
Yeah, like you could start with Kingpin to build an early lead, and then you can swap to Claw, and then Claw can just carry you the rest of the way because he's bounced around the board, killing people he needs to, pop off his area 5, do a beam, push people off points to win you those last few crucial points. Honestly, I think Claw is at his best under Kingpin, and the leadership is kind of secondary. And it's probably not worth the slot for versatile strategy, but just with four leaders that all kind of play well together, I just wanted to bring it up, see what's going on with that. But let's move on to the generic characters, you're like bread and butter. So we're just gonna go in order by name, and we're starting with Black Cat. So Black Cat is a character that was my go-to 3 threat during the old crises because she could. Okay, well, first of all, she's our only long mover in Criminal Syndicate, which I think by itself gives her a lot of credit because, like, turn 1, she could double move to an enemy point, like on Scoundrels, and steal it because she counts as 2 under Kingpin, which is kind of bananas. And she's like deceptively tanky because they can't reroll into her. She has stealth. And if they start damaging her, she can just stagger to start staggering the big characters. But I do think she's worse in this new crisis climate, but she's not bad. So right now I'm thinking B for Black Cat. She's fine. Maybe not your best choice, but I would still definitely use her.
Yeah, I think she's a really strong choice that does some unique things. I don't think she always makes your 10 anymore, which is kind of where I
Yeah, for sure.
put a B character, like a strong character, but they're not always in your 10, I think she has a reputation for being just so insane because she was stealing 2-point extracts for a long time,
Yeah.
which don't exist anymore. Yeah, I think B is a good place for her. That long move play, that's an important one to think about.
Yeah, as she has kind of fallen off of those objectives, there's not much stopping you from just grabbing a different out of affiliation long mover if that's the game plan you're going for. Um, but there's still some use there, definitely, and especially under Kingpin's leadership. If you're just sending her out to go pick some extracts and pass them off and go back out into the field. Um, but yeah, there was definitely a time where I would put her like borderline S tier every game. But yeah, she fortunate for Felicia, but she is falling off.
Um, I think people got so burnt out on the legacy virus meta there when it was worth 8 points. But I do think it's something that's maybe underappreciated right now. Her and Kingpin can put the legacy virus together pretty quickly, especially if you bring Toad. Um, I wonder if that's maybe something that should be explored more. Legacy virus, it's more of like an attrition crisis these days because it only scores 3 points around and it's all on the midline. But 6 points is a lot of points. Maybe that's something worth looking into more even after the crisis changes.
All right, cool. We're all settled on Black Cat, so Bullseye. Who's taking Bullseye?
Oh, I love Bullseye. he's he's just absolutely insane. Um, and I think some of his plays that you can pull off in Syndicate is kind of reflective of that. He's definitely a good, solid two threat. Um, I feel like the game as a whole could use a lot more two threats, just to spam and to splash everywhere. But he's definitely good. He's definitely going to give you that chip damage. He can spike, but he's definitely there for just like the guaranteed 1 to 2 damage. A little bit of an objective player as well with some of his movement that he's getting, kind of keeping himself out of harm's way, protecting the two threat health pool that he has. Um, I would definitely put him more like A tier because I just love to see him on the table. I think he's as a two threat. Do we have any other two threats in affiliation? I
Nope,
don't believe
he's the
so.
only two threat.
Yeah, so I think just even as a numbers game, he's making your 10 every time. And for that alone, I would give him A tier.
To me, Bullseye is S tier
That's fair.
because, like you said, he's our only two threat. He does so much of what Criminal Syndicate wants to do. Like pretty much every game I bring him, I move him once to pick up an extract, and then move him to a point where he counts as two, and then he has his range 4 throwing knife, and that's like totally fine for like a two threat. And he's going to be in every single Criminal Syndicate roster I build, no matter the leader, and I'm never mad to take him to like make my numbers work. Like there are some two threats that definitely feel like dead weight, and you only take them because they're a two threat. Like Wong, I would say, is kind of like that. But Bullseye is a two threat that you're happy to take, and I think that's just like so valuable. Plus, he's really good on scoundrels because the cover doesn't matter to him. So he could just stand on a scoundrel, throw to a different scoundrel, and not care. What do you think, Bob? Is he S tier, A tier?
Yeah, honestly, I had him A tier in my mind, but you make a compelling argument. Um, I think it's good to use our full range of the tier list here. And yeah, I mean, he's everything he said is 100% true. And even though he's not splashy character who feels like he's winning the game on his own, I think he overperforms for a 2-threat. I'm happy with him in S tier for
Yeah.
Criminal Syndicate.
And I do think part of that S tier is being able to work well with multiple leaderships. You can pretty much take him with any game plan. Good under Kingpin, like you said. Move him somewhere, sit on a point, but on 4 and 5 dice attacks, like that 4 dice builder, you're just maybe hoping for your bleed and 1-2 damage at most. But if you're rerolling a skull, like that 4 dice is suddenly looking a lot bigger than it actually is. So yeah, he definitely works under multiple leaderships there. And as that 2-threat, he might daze pretty early, proc claws movement. Kind of hard to go fishing for wilds for Modoc on 4 dice, but we do have Modoc down in C tier, so.
Okay, well, I mean, when you do spike with the Modoc leadership, Bullseye could randomly do like 4 damage, which is pretty phenomenal. Yeah, I think Bullseye is an easy S tier for me. But this next character like might get a little heated.
Well, Bobby said to use the full range, right?
Oh, okay. No. Crossbones is not D tier. He is no way he's our first D tier. Okay, let me make my argument for Crossbones, and then you guys can put me down. Okay. Crossbows is a 3-threat, which I like always talk about Kingpin because he's my favorite character, but you want to go wide with him, so you want as many 2 and 3 threats as you can fit, plus maybe Rhino, but we'll get to that. But okay, so Crossbones, he has a 5 dice strike that he can pump up to 8 dice, and he's gaining power off of all that. But his main thing is that he can spend a power to reduce damage by 1. So he's tanky. So like he'll like get to a point, and then he has the aggro where if you hit him, he just moves back. Like if he gets pushed by Shuri, he just moves back to the point, whatever. And I like do think he's really only good under Kingpin, but he's very good under Kingpin. And his slow movement is really his main issue. I don't think it's that big of an issue to put him into D, but you guys can shoot me down if you want. Personally, I would put him into like B or C.
Let's hear your thoughts, John.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that short move on a small base, it just gets me. I know he's got some good tools, but he doesn't have any great tools. So like I definitely don't see him in B tier. I could maybe concede C tier just because when he's in your game plan, he has that role that he can perform, and it's what you've planned for. Yeah, he can definitely get it done. But just even at 3-threat, I feel like there's other out of affiliation options maybe that you can go for that you're not really missing out on anything, and you might be getting some extra tools there.
Yeah, and Jim loves Sin and Crossbones, and
I do.
I think they're a little maligned in general by the community. Maybe more so than they deserve. I don't know. If he was a medium mover, it would be such a different story,
Yeah.
But he can be a liability in some ways. I feel like when you take him, you're hoping for everything to go right for him. You're hoping your opponent doesn't just wipe him out with energy attacks with his 2 defense. You're hoping he doesn't get thrown long by Juggernaut or something. You're even hoping if your opponent has like Lizard, for example, they can actually double move and stand on your side of like the infinity formula. And sometimes that can mean Crossbones can't even get on the objective.
That's rough. That is true.
He can be good. He's tanky for a 3-threat. I think AMG went through a phase of printing some really tanky 3 threats, which probably makes him seem maybe a little worse than he deserves. You know, I don't want to hurt your feelings, Jim.
No, don't do
I
it.
I think you could squeak him into C tier if you really want to.
Do you guys really think D?
I mean, so to me, a D is like I question whether you should even take him in like a fun game because I'm worried whether you're going to have fun with them. So he's probably not a D. He's probably a C.
I mean, in my head, he's the worst one in the core set. You know, like when you're introduced to the game and you pick up your core set, if that's your first, first time playing the game, like, is he gonna do anything for you? Like, are you even gonna take him in that first tutorial game? Maybe because he's simple, but I don't know. I've never felt the need to put him in a roster.
Yeah, you guys are probably right. Okay, I mean, he did get a big boost when Sin came out, and the Sin Crossbones combo is really good. And just in like, and they still have like the OG husband and wife where it doesn't cost power. So Sin can go followed by Crossbones, which I've had some really good games where like Sin and Crossbones both get to go back to back in days like a 5 threat character. You know, usually it's like Scarlet Witch, somebody with like kind of like lower physical defense. But I guess C is fine for crossbows. I mean, I have more to say about Sin as well, but I like will say crossbows does have a decent tactics card now that gives him a range 5 energy, which we'll talk about later. But I am glad he's not in D because he's still fun in a friendly game. Like you won't feel bad about taking him. But somebody that you might feel bad about taking even in a friendly game is Miss Romanoff, Electra. Oh, I'm sorry. Electra Nachios. My bad.
Or as John Favreau said in the 2003 Daredevil movie, electric nachos.
Wait, really? Did he say that? Well, Miss Nachos. You guys ever used her before, or is she so bad that you've never tried her?
I've
She's
never.
kind of rough, kind of like OG Daredevil a little bit. Like I want to love them based on like the IP alone, but she kind of wants for a lot. Like she wants to spend her power, but she has none at any given point. Um, I think nowadays she's finding more of a home in some other places, maybe like Hellfire Club. But as far as ranking her in Syndicate, um, I don't know. She's got some synergies with Daredevil and with ninjas, but I think she's still just not quite able to do what she wants.
Yeah, the definition of a D character for me is they struggle to even do what they're supposed to do. Um, and her power economy is just so bad. I think she's a D tier. I like John said. I think if you're bringing her, you're thinking about her with other affiliations, like maybe Steve Rogers, for the one power, martial prowess. Um, one, helping her with her power game. Hellfire Club helping her with her power game. I think she just struggles in Criminal Syndicate.
You guys are right. I mean, she is D, but just to bring up a couple points, if you love this character and want to use her, I'm gonna try and give you some pointers. Uh, the like ninjas are very good. Like just the fact she has ninjas can like change your whole game plan. And she can also summon them more consistently than Daredevil because hers is a range 3. So you have a guaranteed range 3 summon the ninjas, and then they can run off and hold an extract or do whatever. Um, Also, I do think she'll have new life under Claw because the ninjas dying will trigger Claw's leadership. So like turn 1, you bring her, move a ninja up, vanish, move Claw short, and then maybe maybe if the other player messed up, get 2 shots with claw. So that's something to think about. But she's literally the only character in the game without a gainer or strike. Like she could just whiff her throwing blades and do nothing, which feels really, really bad. Um, but
I
like
will I will say essentially she has two gainers kind of, right? Um she has that
yeah,
superpower that kind of turns them into gainers, but still.
like she can gain 1 power back from using martial prowess, so she can spend 2 martial prowess, get 5 defense dice. If you block it all, you deal damage back and gain a power. So that's something, but you so rarely even have that 2 power to activate martial prowess that she's just so awkward. And the only times I've had success with her is when I just ran her in, got her killed, so she had 8 power to do her combo, the throwing blade, place within one, do her spender. And that's fun, but it's a very niche situation. And I mean, we don't need to beat a dead horse here, but she's probably D tier and maybe our only D tier. We'll see. But let's move on to Green Goblin, who is an OG member of Criminal Syndicate. Um, he was one of our only 4 threats with Killmonger, and he has a range 4 energy, but you just don't really see him played in Criminal Syndicate rosters. And I think he should be a little bit more. Like he's not a bad character. He's very fast, medium base, medium move with flight. Good strike with the pumpkin bombs, blow up buildings. Um, for me, I'm thinking maybe B tier. Like you're not wrong to take him, but I think nowadays there's a lot better 4 threat options in Criminal Syndicate.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always looking at him. Now with Claw coming out, we have a great energy attacker, but before that, Criminal Syndicate was really lacking for energy attackers. Um, it's like he's always in consideration. I'm like, oh, he's cool, he does good things, but he never quite makes the 10 for me. I do think, Criminal Syndicate, Spider Foes dual affiliated is a very real thing you can do. I think B is solid for him.
Yeah, definitely no complaints from me there. In strictly from the lens of him in Syndicate, I think B is totally fine. I love Spider Foes just on the premise. They're just some wacky villains. Um, so in his own affiliation, maybe he's higher, but here I think B. If your game plan involves something around him, I think you could have a lot of success and a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've been seeing Spider Foes put up some great results lately.
Firsthand.
Yeah, yeah, but I think under Criminal Syndicate, I think B is solid for him.
All right. And next up is the new kid on the block, Gwenpool, which I think both you guys own. So one of you take
She's
her away. I
still in
know
her box.
at least you own her.
It is true. It is true.
Yeah, I bought her, quickly got her built and painted for a local LVO qualifier and played her, and she was excellent. I think she's a very solid character. Um, she's just like a pile of stats to some extent. She's tanky with the damage reduction. She's got good defense dice. She's got rerolls, which makes her really consistent. She can place range 3. Her builder has Pierce on it. She's got an 8 die spender. I think I misplayed her a little bit. I made a few too many of her range 4 die attacks one game, and it might have cost me the game instead of just sending her in to be a little more effective at close range. So I do think she can be a little tricky to play. She opens up a lot of options, but also some brain teasers with roster building with her tactics cards. And then even in game, she could put you in the tank for a while with her tactics card that lets you swap for another tactics card. I think she's at least an A. Time will tell if she's maybe even better, but she's got some stiff competition at 4 threat, so I think an A.
Yeah, I definitely love her cards. Like you said, raises Syndicate is just all about raising questions, right? And being able to swap cards depending on the situation. Maybe your opponent doesn't quite know, like, are you gonna switch over to versatile strategy, or are you going to um all of a sudden, I don't know. There's just so many things you could do with it. The other one I think is the one I'm pretty excited about, where you can use your range 4 spender, or your range 4 gainer, sorry, um, just to be able to yank someone from across the map. Uh, what's the name of that one? The demise.
They say keep your
Oh,
enemies
your
close.
enemies close.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that has a great home. Maybe under a Kingpin, just to get someone off of a point. Um, some combination of her and Claw, where someone is passed around the board. um, it could definitely have a lot of fun there.
Yeah, she's very flexible, and I think she's good with all 4 leaders. She's tanky for Kingpin, does a lot of damage with Shadowland Daredevil. Modoc, she's got the wild hit trigger on her range 4. So if you get the wild, you automatically get the trigger to put on one of those like 4 status conditions. And I guess Claw is her weakest synergy, but you can kind of throw her in there, and if they spend the resources to take her down, you're still getting to benefit from Claw. So yeah, I think she's a solid A. She's probably the second best 4 threat. But you're never, feeling bad if you take her. So now Hood. Hood honestly might be my favorite Criminal Syndicate 3 threat. I feel like every roster I take him in, I want to bring Hood. Like he's the only character in the whole game with a Mystic Rapid Fire, which is so good because there's so many characters with weak Mystic defense that he just shreds. And then once he takes 1 point of damage, he's on his possessed side, has the charge, super tanky. He's just very versatile for all kinds of roles. Um, what do you guys think? I might put him in A, honestly, just as my favorite 3 threat.
Yeah, I don't have any firsthand experience playing him. Played against him a time or two, but he definitely plays like a 4 threat. He just has such an impact on the game, um, in either form, really. Like he can go pretty aggro if he wants to, but he's also very good if he just sits back and he's distributing his healing and taking his shots. And I am never quite sure how to deal with him. So just as someone who has played against him, he definitely feels like pretty high tier there. So I'm definitely okay with the A tier.
Yeah, I think he's real solid. I think he's an A. His his possessed side is really scary. He usually gets 1 turn a game that's just pretty wild, in terms of impact from a 3 threat. Your opponent usually is gonna respect him a lot. Like he tends to get focused, which if your 3 threat is taking attacks from their higher threat characters, that's taking pressure off your other characters. So yeah, I think he's a solid A.
Yeah, he's not worthy of S tier, even though he's probably the best 3 threat. Like he
Yeah.
could just do a little bit more, I think. But okay, so next up we have Killmonger, who I know is one of Bobby's favorite characters. So Bob, I'll let you take him.
I love Killmonger. The very first affiliation I played in this game was Cabal under Red Skull before Malekith had come out. I loved just double tapping like my opponent's Hulk, and then taking off his activation token with Red Skull's tactics card and doing it again. Killmonger lets you roll tons of dice. I know a few seasons ago, was it Blake won the TTS season using Killmonger with Thanos? But yeah, I mean, I just think he's a cool character who rolls a ton of dice. In Criminal Syndicate, I've kind of cooled off on him a little bit, unfortunately, just because he doesn't always fit the Kingpin plan very well. He's a very attrition focused character, and he tends to make one or two big attacks rather than like the rapid fire attacks that Daredevil likes. So I think he's a great character. I think maybe he suffers a little bit from lack of synergy with the leaders. And he's a 4 threat, which, I think we're seeing criminals tend to get their list filled up with 4 threats. So that puts more pressure on him. Um, in my heart, I think he's a high B. See if you guys agree with that or not.
That's what I was thinking is B. Like he's like kind of like Goblin, where he's fine and he's gonna do well for you, but he's not your first choice. And he's a little bit one dimensional. Like he is just damage, which is like what Claw and Shadowland Daredevil are trying to do, and Modoc to like a certain extent. But yeah, Killmonger's fine. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think like Bobby was saying, he had a much more prominent role before, but now there's just so many tools that maybe he shines in other affiliations a little bit more. Um, like Wakanda until the the new models come out. Um, maybe even more once they have a new leadership there. In Syndicate, he's not as needed. There's definitely some other options there. I think it'd be a ton of fun to have a game with Modoc, maybe a couple other characters where you're just focused on getting VP outside of the traditional ways. Um, just
Yeah.
seeing have them on Legacy Virus, just seeing how many VP can you spike in a turn. um, but outside of that, I feel like B is a good one with the right gameplay in mind.
Would you guys put him over Green Goblin or below? Like, would you rather have Killmonger or Green Goblin?
Personally, Green Goblin, I just like some of the range and the not necessarily up in your face attacking plays that he has. He has more of a board presence, I would say.
Um, yeah, Green Goblin is probably more consistent in Criminal Syndicate than Killmonger. Um, you do raise a good point, John, about the synergy with Modoc's leadership. You could get pretty strong attack in with that combo. Usurp the Throne is such a good tactics card. I mean, the threat of 2 victory points and you're dazing their high threat character anyway is so good. I like him better under Cabal, where he has the Dark Rain card to give him more consistency.
Yeah.
It feels pretty bad when you make your big Killmonger attack and he just happens to whiff. So yeah, I think he's in a good spot there.
All right, perfect. So next up is Craven, who I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with. I just he is very squishy because he has 5 health, 3 defense, and he has 1 reroll on offense and defense. And he has some like niche superpowers. So like you like kind of want to go with him early to use his superpowers, but you also want an enemy to be within range 2 to do his like combo with the kukri strike and then the spear. He's a little awkward to play, and I don't think he synergizes very well with the leaders. But that being said, I think he won a lot of 3 threats in Criminal Syndicate, and he's always like my 12th character for the roster. So he rarely makes my roster, but I always want to put him in. So to me, that might put him into like C tier. Maybe that's too low. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I love him in Spider Foes. um, I think he has a home under Daredevil at least. With that reroll, and he's going pretty aggro. It's a little bit more consistent to get a wild there for his was it his elusive to move around. Um, Plus, when if he's able to get out and start marking people, the rest of your team can come in and start rolling extra dice, which is a huge impact. Um, Especially if you're doing it, with multiple characters. Um, I would probably go low B, but I wouldn't be upset with the C tier there.
Bob, you're a tiebreaker. B or C?
Um, Honestly, I've not played Craven a lot. I think he is a very well-rounded character. I do wonder, if I should try him out more. I would put him in a C just based on he's just such a generalist, like he doesn't have any of the special qualities that like Hood or Mysterio um, have that make them just kind of more exciting in specific situations. I think C is fine for him, but you're never
He
going to go
does let you
wrong
do,
taking him.
yeah. He does let you do the Spider Foes splash because he's another character that's criminals and Spider Foes. So if you're doing a dual Spider Foes criminal, I think he's an easy pick. But otherwise, he's just a little clunky. Like I just really wish he had 6 health on his healthy side. That'd be so much better. Okay, now we here at Syndicate Gaming love OG Modoc. Like specifically, Bobby and I love this character. Bring him in like every roster. Tell us why Modoc is busted, Bobby.
All right, y'all. This is my hottest take of this video. I think Modoc is S tier.
Oh,
I, you know,
okay.
I wasn't around when he dominated the metagame back in the early days of Marvel, but I've heard a lot about it on podcasts. He was the only mystic attacker for a while, and he could bow any number of characters. So he was just insane. And he's been nerfed since then. But I wonder if he just, sometimes you have this baseline in your head of this character is absolutely insane, and then they get nerfed and they get brought down to a more reasonable level. And then I wonder if people just have kind of moved on to newer characters and forgotten about him. But I think he is just still so good, and I've played him a lot. I mean, I've played him probably more than any other character, and I think he is so consistent with his damage. I mean, Modoc kills people. He does not mess around. He throws a 6-die attack, range 4 with rerolls. He has great power economy, so he can always do what he wants to do. Bowing people, throwing things long. I mean, projecting forward automatic damage at long range is pretty wild. His spender is great at just throws 14 dice out there for 3 energy, 3 power, I should say. So, and I've really enjoyed dunking on Logan with him recently. People love bringing Logan, and Modoc just is so good against Logan.
Yeah.
So that's why
Just
he's
to
an S tier for me.
just to jump on the Modoc train, like will say that the new crisis changes really helped Modoc because everything is closer together. So I mean most of my games with Modoc, I move him once turn one and then he never moves again. And just turrets and blasts. It moves people off of points for Kingpin. With Daredevil, he has the rerolls. Like, I mean, now he has 2 brand new tactics cards that I think need more testing. But I think he's our best 5 threat in criminals. Like right now, I'd take him over Claw or Ulik, who we'll get to. But the vast majority of my criminal syndicate rosters have OG Modoc. But John, bring us back down to earth. Why is
Um,
Modoc not S tier?
yeah. I guess I don't know if this is devil's advocate or not, but don't know. Like you said, you move him once, and he's just a force to be reckoned with from that one point. But I playing Guardians, can I take Nebula and Rocket and just absolutely mess him up? Like if he's on a point, will Nebula just go in and punch twice her threat value, and someone else hits him from out of range? I have found that even though he has 10 health on his healthy side, it's still getting chewed through pretty quick. If that might even be a strength, honestly. If I'm sending everything I have into Modoc, is that freeing everyone else up to do what they want to do. So like maybe that's a strength, but I feel like I've had pretty good success against him just by focusing him down pretty quick. That's about all I have against him, really. Just the thought of him having been stronger than this just blows my mind.
Yeah, well, he was way too strong before he got changed. So now you don't feel as bad bringing Modoc. But like, we referenced the Cherokee Open earlier. I brought Modoc in the finals game, and people were shocked. People were like, "Holy cow! I haven't seen Modoc in years. What is happening?" And then he like cleaned up that game.
Oh yeah.
So
He
yeah,
sat on a back point. Kingpin got up in it, and Modoc was just like handling everything else.
yeah. I am surprised we have Modoc in S tier, but I'm not mad about it.
Yeah,
All
I mean,
right.
I will say, realistically, he's probably an A tier. I love him so much that I want him in S tier. My my first time playing against Magic Nick on TTS, he did teach me a harsh lesson about the weaknesses of Modoc.
That was Hulk,
He,
right?
yeah, he used Avengers Assemble and Hulk to throw Modoc turn one and then continue throwing him every turn. And Modoc did very little that game. So he's characters who can actually move him, characters who have size four throws are very good against him. And John, you are right. He does die. He does die if you move him up too close to the enemy. So to me, he's an S tier. In reality, he's probably an A tier. But
Let's put him at the top of A tier
yeah,
because you don't want him every game. There are some crises that he just doesn't really work on because they're too spread out. But he's just very fun. Try him out if you haven't tried him since the nerf. He is fantastic. All right, moving on to another beloved character, Mysterio. Okay, so let me say that he has the same speed as Crossbones. Does that hold him back? Or is he too cool to be in C tier?
I just love the character, just the character design and everything about him. So yeah, automatic S tier.
Oh.
He no no. He is slow, and that does hold him back. I very much like him in Spider Foes. Um, Bobby and I recently played against the same player who had uh just a slew of booby traps, and Mysterio was like the focus of his game plan, and he did so much in a game for like way more than I was expecting out of the short mover. Um, I think I would probably go low B, but I'm sure that's way too high for him. In Syndicate, the right game plan, he's probably like said before, like 11 or 12. So he's maybe not making your roster all that often, but just if you have a game plan in mind, I think he can definitely be a good piece to kind of sit around and turret, like you said. The traps are fantastic, and he's got really high defense sometimes. If you have someone that's coming into him that's pretty power starved, he's really tanky. So maybe high C tier. I don't know. I can be convinced either way.
yeah. I personally, I'm happy with him in B. I think he's a strong role player. Um, it's only certain crises that you can take him because he's so slow. But where he's standing, he really controls that area well with his booby trap, um, getting some free movement, moving people potentially with his attack. He's got a great tactics card. I like him in B tier. He's very good at what he does. He just has some situations where he has glaring weaknesses.
Yeah. B tier is right for him. Like you guys said it, he has glaring weaknesses. You can only bring him on certain crises. But those crises he's good on, he's very good on. And he only needs like one or two good rolls to just like carry a game. He needs to get
Hmm.
to that 3 power to tricks and traps, deal 1 damage with his strike to move them and then trap them. Like he could do some pretty nutty things, but sometimes he just doesn't, and that's a feels bad. You probably just want a more consistent character at your 3 threat that's going to perform every game. But he's super fun. Like, there's like no doubt he's one of the funnest characters in the game. But just that slow move, just like my boy Crossbones, is rough. Like
Yeah.
throwing him, he's just kind of out for a turn. All right, let's move on to Omega Red. He's kind of a weird one. And when he was spoiled and he was shown to be in Criminal Syndicate, I was hyped because I was like, hey, this is a tanky guy that poisons everyone around him, deals auto damage, has like a range 4 medium pull, right? I'm like pretty sure that's what it is. But
Mhm.
Yes.
when you actually play him, he's very awkward and clunky, and I wish he did more damage. Um, what do you guys think of him? I might my first take is C. He's just awkward and clunky.
I mean, there are more options of leaderships now for him, so I have not seen him really in Modoc or obviously not in Claw yet. Um, Claw, I don't really see him having a ton of synergies since he is on the tanky side. Modoc, well, maybe something else I'm missing there, but I think he does a lot of things for some other affiliations, especially around like the maybe in Hydra with his conditions and maybe some other places. But in Syndicate, I'm okay with the C tier there. He's just not quite where he should be for that 4 threat. If you're putting him against some of these other 4 threats, if you just want a tank, are you going Gwenpool? Or, if you want more damage, are you splashing Daredevil in another leadership? Or is he just, you know, I don't know. I don't see him going all that high on a list.
Yeah, I agree he's awkward because he's got the slow move on the medium base. He's tanky, so he wants to stand on objectives, but then he has a medium pull, which if things work out just right, he can pull people past him off objectives. But other times you're sitting there and you're like, I'm actually moving my opponent closer to where they want to be if I pull them. Um, I thought about him with like Daredevil, pulling someone in next to Daredevil so he can mess them up, or even just like Hood can double tap them. But yeah, he doesn't quite get there, especially compared to when he's got that stiff 4 threat competition. I think C threats or C tiers right for him.
He almost wants to spend like 4 power a turn, and he just like can never have that much power. It's like, all right, I'm gonna do my 5 dice strike. Hope I get 3 power off of this, and that like
Yeah.
never happens, right? Because he has 0 dice consistency or anything. So
Yeah.
I think C is good for him. He's not horrible, but you're not really playing him in Criminal Syndicate, if I'm being honest. Okay. Well, somebody that we're definitely playing in Criminal Syndicate, and we might not even need to really talk about a whole lot, is one of my favorite characters is Rhino. I think he is the top of S tier. He is one of the reasons to play Criminal Syndicate. He's that good. He has an amazing tactics card. I mean, I can't even think of a reason why you wouldn't put him in S tier. Like, can you guys think of anything? Like maybe on a researcher, he can't steal, but it's like he doesn't even
Yeah.
need the card, you know?
Yeah, I'm kind of blanking on a reason not to play him in a game, honestly. Like, unless you've played so many games of Rhino that you're just, oh, I want to try something else this time. That's about all I
Yeah.
got. Like he is a
Like,
blast to play. He is just for a short move, he is hyper mobile. Like he just does some wild things. Like if he's doing pay to flips, he's just hitting like three of them a turn. Like he's just all over the place.
Yeah, Rhino's insane. He's so good. He's top of S tier. Like the more I've played him, the better I've found him to be, to the point where I wonder if he needs a nerf, honestly. Um, the range 3 attack placing 1 makes him so mobile with the large base. Yeah, he has a very consistent card that steals an objective. If he's within range 1 of someone, it's 2 power. He throws them medium. Yeah, I mean, there are only good things to say about Rhino. I found myself building my list around him more and more. Like I've started adding Smash. He's crazy with Smash. Um,
oh yeah.
you can get he's so mobile. He can stand in the right place at the start of the turn, and then he can add 3 to his attacks for the round. So you make like an 8 dice attack and then like a 10 dice attack with his Stampede. Yeah, Rhino's crazy.
Yeah, like Criminal Syndicate was like just a general, maybe like second tier, like A tier in terms of like all the different teams. But like as soon as we got Rhino, we just jumped so high. So did Spider Foes. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
that's why Spider Foes is doing so well, is because of Rhino. Like, please try out Rhino if you haven't used him yet. He's also just a ton of fun to play. So he's really strong, a lot of fun to play. Like he is just an awesome character. But I don't think he's like overpowered. Like he like will die if you focus him, but he's just so flexible that he is like definitely deserving of the very top S tier. Like I want to bring him in every roster, and I need a good reason to not bring him in every game. Like honestly, he might even need to be in like S plus tier. He's good with all the leaders. Like, yeah, Rhino is phenomenal. All right, so Sin. Let me just say that I love Sin. She is one of my favorite characters to play in the game, but I recognize she's not the best. And honestly, I would put her below Crossbows because I think if you're going to take Sin or Crossbows and you're not taking both, you would rather have Crossbows. Like Crossbows does more on his own, where Sin, I think, needs Crossbones to really maximize her output. So I'm thinking bottom of C. I don't think she's D because she's still relevant. She has stealth. She has automatic rapid fire, which is like actually really good and kind of rare in the game. So she's great with Shadowland Daredevil and probably with Claw. Like, she's a 3 threat that dies pretty easily. So it might
Yeah,
trigger his
only four
leadership.
health. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. 4 health on the healthy side. Oh, dude, that's right. I had actually forgotten about that. That
6
is,
on the back for some
yeah,
reason.
yeah. Which is like anti-synergy with Kingpin because he wants them to be healthy.
Yeah,
Um, do you guys think she should be in D or is the bottom of C fine?
I mean, I would have said D. I said D on Crossbones, and I think you're right that he's probably better on his own. Um, I mean, you can make an argument for it for sure under the right leadership, like Daredevil, and then Claw, just because you can get that quick daze out of her. Seems weird to take someone just for that, but um, yeah, I feel like 3 threat.
Yeah.
There's probably some other options, but you're right that stealth is pretty good. So
Yeah,
I
I
I
mean,
could see bottom of C tier just for that one-off scenario where the stars have aligned and I should take Sin this game.
paying 3 threat just to trigger Claw's leadership is a very bad spot to be in now that you say that. It's like that is, I mean, that's like literally the ninjas could do that. multiple times a game for free.
Right.
But like Sin was better when we didn't have Shadowland Daredevil. I ran Sin in my Criminal Syndicate for that like alternate plan of like, what do I do if I end up on pay to flips? I'll bring Sin and maybe get the leadership. But do you think she's at C, Bob, or does she fall to D?
I don't think she's a D tier. I think she still, does productive things. um,
Yeah. She's not like
I
actively hindering your game plan.
Yeah, she is a bit of a liability with how easy to date she is. That's really the reason why she struggles so much is that 4 health on the
There
healthy
have been
side.
games I've had where the other player recognizes she's really easy to daze. So there are times where they actually overcommit and get into her stealth range just to kill her. And then that character that dazed her is, now caught out of position. So, but honestly, her spender is horrible. Like I don't know why you would do her spender over just the rapid fire. Like literally her spender is 6 dice with like a crazy trigger to get the second attack. Whereas the rapid fire is a guaranteed 8 dice. Dude, the more I talk about her, the more I want to put her in D, which I
Yeah.
hate
Yeah,
because I love her, but
In Syndicate, I don't know. It's really, yeah, like you said, the rapid fire and the stealth. And I mean, there's some other, like, hit and run is always nice to have. I've played against her a couple times, and she's did pretty well in Cabal, not as a leader, but just in Cabal. And in Hydra, I thought she did pretty well when I played against them. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
in
Honestly,
Syndicate though, mm,
yeah. I think you're making a good point, John. I think she's better not in Criminal Syndicate. She might be a D tier, um, just to try to use the whole spectrum, a little more.
plus she's a Nazi, so
Is she?
Yeah,
I guess she's Red Skull's daughter, right?
yeah.
Um,
although
but
I'm pretty sure she was the main bad guy in the Fear Itself line that gave us the Hammers crisis. So if for no other reason than that,
The
she's
S tier.
S tier.
No.
um, yeah, um, I think I don't want people to never play her. Like, and one thing that what you said about like people moving into stealth, Jim. One point that I wish maybe we had mentioned at the start of the video actually is Marvel Crisis Protocol is such a high skill game. It is such a well designed game with interesting rules. I think player skill has a far bigger impact on who wins than whether you brought the perfect team, and that's like, if you really know what you're doing, you can easily win a game with all C tier characters, and that's one of the cool things about this game. So I don't want anyone to take this as like, oh, I'm doing it wrong if I take anyone below A tier, um, try out these lower tier characters and it can help you learn the game even, because you have to learn how to compensate for their weaknesses. But yeah, I do think I agree. I think if you're taking Sin, you're not taking her in Criminal Syndicate usually. So
Yeah, like just to piggyback on that, the Sin Crossbones husband wife combo is the same thing with Corvus Proxima. That is a high skill ceiling superpower because you can use that to like change priority. You could steal priority if you hold both of them to the end of the round. Like there's some tricksy stuff you could do with them. They're just on. I mean, Sin is such a fragile body, and she's the one that has to activate first, which does kind of throw you off sometimes because she wants to like hit and run, and then she might be out of range of crossbows to even do the husband and wife combo. So yeah, let's hope Sin gets a buff in the future because I just love her crossbows. But let's move on to Taskmaster, who is an interesting character, and I also wish she would get a buff because all the shield throws in the game now gain a power except for his. And I feel like he would be so much better if his shield throw just gained a power. Because right now he's just like moving and making one sword attack. I mean, honestly, he's probably in C for me. Like he's my one of my last choices for a 3 threat.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Kind of like what you said with the other shield throws, like all these people that he's copying. I'd rather kind of have just the original more often than not.
Yeah.
Um, maybe if he, like you said, he's kind of lacking on the economy and the power aspect. A lot of people are lacking in like one area, but he's kind of got multiple areas where he needs a buff. So if they could just give him, like that gainer, or if they gave him some sort of like charge, or I guess hit and run would be more thematic. He's hitting and then leaving. Yeah, giving him something else, I think, could get him maybe to like a B tier. Just give him a little bit more utility. But yeah, as it stands, he's got some interesting stuff, and he's worth throwing on a on the table for a casual game just to try him out. But
Yeah.
he's on the low side for me as well.
Let me throw this
Yeah.
out there. I think Taskmaster's tanky, so he likes Kingpin, but I think he has good synergy with Modoc, Scientist Supreme as well. Because Modoc could like do the bodyguard thing to Taskmaster. And if Taskmaster is hit twice, he gets like 6 defense dice, which is good. And I think there's some synergy there that I haven't tried out yet. And he also has like one of the best spenders in the game, just from like a power to damage perspective, because it's 2 power and he could potentially have like 8 dice. But the problem is, how is he getting that 2 power to use the spender? So,
Yeah,
Bob,
maybe
is
like
he C or
a Modoc.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like Modoc passes some, like big attack to Taskmaster and he survives because he has extra dice and then he can counterattack. But Bob, any thoughts on Taskmaster?
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. He really his range 4 attack just isn't very exciting, with it not gaining power for him. And then he has to be in range 2 to really do a lot otherwise, and he has no free movement. Outside of he has to take a move action to move. I do wonder if Modoc might have given him some new life. I think I'm most excited about Taskmaster and then maybe Gambit with Modoc in terms of having a lot of synergy. And that's a team I want to find some time to try out some more, maybe at the local game store. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know though. It's like if he has to be within range 2 of this slow moving character to be good, all your opponent's got to do is chuck one of them medium range and your whole game plan kind of falls apart. So, but yeah, I think he's a solid C, you know.
Do you think he's the bottom of C or should we bump him up? Like, is he below Omega and
Um,
Crossbones?
I think you're gonna more consistently get value out of him, certainly than Crossbones, and he's tankier than Craven even. So yeah, I think he's higher up in the C tier.
Put him next to Modoc where he might synergize.
Yeah.
Gotta keep him in range too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. All right, and then last but certainly not least is Ulik the Rock Troll. I was very hyped for this character, just like most of these characters. And the more I played him, the less I liked him, which might be like a controversial take. What do you guys think of Ulik?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I told Bobby I was excited to see what you were thinking.
Oh, really?
In my head, he should be S tier, but I have not figured out that gameplay to understand it, what would put him there. You know, he is very tanky. He has a surprising amount of damage. Not surprising because if you just look at it, he's got 6 and 9 dice attacks. The Shatter Mountains, Shatter Bones is just it's a lot of power, but it's just so much fun to get it off. And then just the hyper mobility again with like his rock control card, and then just all of his little leaps. Um, I would definitely say he's a solid A tier if I understood him better.
Yeah, I think we could go really deep on Ulick. You know, there's a lot to talk about here. um, I I agree with you, Jim. I think in practice he has not been as good as I thought he would be. Um, and I think as a group, I think the three of us are probably lower on him than the general community in Marvel. I know Pat Dunford really likes Ulick, you know, arguably one of the best Marvel Crisis Protocol players in the world. So,
That does
you
say
know,
something.
yeah, that certainly says something. I've thought a lot about him, and I think what it comes down to is, he's very tanky, very fast. So you love to use him with Kingpin because he can get on secures and be hard to kill. But I think the problem is, his throw is only terrain, and then his attack, it's 6 dice with a wild push. And that's just not very consistent. Like that's his only real displacement that he has. And you just can't count on it. If you're in this close game in the late turns and you're like, oh, I really need to get this character off the point, like you're so much better off with a character who has a throw, than trying to get that wild on Ulick's attack.
Or like bringing Modoc, who has, the 2 power guaranteed movement.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Modoc can struggle to get in range of people to do that, but yeah, at least it's guaranteed. I think Ulick. My bottom line on him now, after thinking about him for a long time, I think he's actually an attrition character more than a control character. And I think if you use him as an attrition character who can do his insanely mobile charge that he has, where he like moves and places, to beat up like their weaker 3-threat characters, like he can really bully some weaker characters in the attrition game. I think that's where he really shines. So I put him A tier, but I would caution, like make sure what your plan for him is, because he'll never be bad, but there might be better options in certain scenarios.
Okay. I also have a lot of thoughts on Ulick. I think I struggle to even talk about him because like he looks so good on paper, but whenever I use him, he just like doesn't work for me. So maybe that's me just playing him wrong. But like you said, so many times I'm like, all right, I need a wild on this 6 dice attack, and it just doesn't happen, and then he doesn't have any dice consistency, so that it just doesn't work. Like he's a 5 threat that makes a 6 dice attack, and you hope it works out for you, but if it doesn't, he's not doing anything else. He is very tanky. Plus, I will say that he could do the turn one eyes on the prize um, play to steal at midline, and that's our only access to it in Criminal Syndicate, and that is very good. But coming up here, we're going to talk about a splash character that can also do it, that I think we want more for less threat, which we have
Yeah,
three
Beta Ray
five
Bill.
threat. Yeah, yeah. That is Bill, who we're going to talk about shortly. But
There's another one too.
there is another one that does it without eyes on the prize, not to bury the lead here. But I would personally put Ulick B tier because I think right now I would rather have Modoc or Claw, and he's like my third choice for a 5 threat, or even fourth choice with Juggernaut, who we're also going to talk about. But that's probably just my personal bias. But I mean, this is our tier list, so we could use our personal bias. But you guys both said A, and I'd probably put him at high B, so I'm fine with an A. Like, would you put him over Claw or Modoc, or like where do you think he winds up in A tier?
Yeah,
Like, is he closer to B, closer to S? Like,
I think closer to the B end of the spectrum. And um, yeah, I mean, Hood doesn't even always make my 10. I think the line between A and B can be a little bit blurred. Yeah, I mean, Ulik, like the bar is high for a 5 threat, and you don't have a lot of room for multiple 5 threats in your list. So he's not always making the list for me, you know. So I think he's like low A tier.
Do you like him more than Claw, John? Or would you rather have Claw?
Having not played Claw, it's kind of hard to say, but
Yeah.
as of right now, I think I like Claw more. I don't know. I do like the hypermobile characters, which Ulik definitely fits. I think a lot of people have had a lot of pretty famous players and podcasts and everybody have put him in like a Hellfire Club, give him that extra power and everything, and he seems to do really well there. In Syndicate, I think I probably want Law. But yeah, again, it just comes down. I think it just comes down to play style and then game plan. On the right crises, you know, if he's just grabbing things and moving around and punching, that's great. Law's more just gonna, you know, sit in the middle and spin around and shoot things. Yeah, they have very different very different types of control, I guess. Yeah, I'd probably say Claw for now.
All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's a good point, John. I think Ulik is better in Hellfire Club and in Cabal than he is in Criminal Syndicate. Because the Hellfire Club can give him the power. Malekith can move him and give him the power. You know, we Criminal Syndicate, we don't have any way to activate his charge turn 1 outside of like advanced R&D. And if you do the
We
eyes
don't
on the
want to play
prize,
advanced R&D.
no, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's an option.
And if you do the eyes on the prize, play turn 1, and then he doesn't get attacked, like he's starting turn 2 with 2 power, and he can't use his charge. So, yeah.
All right. Well, here's our final tier list of the Criminal Syndicate characters. Do you guys have any final thoughts or any placements that were surprising or
I don't think I expected new Modoc to go so low, but I think it makes a lot of
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, same here. I
Very
like want to
disappointing,
like
but
him. He, again, it's so awkward. And if we're talking about competitive play, he's just not consistent enough or fast enough, really.
Yeah, you know, we certainly don't claim to be an unquestionable authority on this. I hope, you know, anyone who's watching this video has had a lot of like thoughts stimulated by this. I know it's made me think about a lot of things I hadn't thought about before. I think this looks like a great tier list. It looks pretty in line to me with where these characters should be. I do like some of these B threat or B tier characters. I think a theme that they have, like especially Black Cat, Killmonger, Mysterio, is that they're like amazing sometimes, and then other times they're just not great. So
Yeah.
it looks like we're kind of valuing general consistency a lot. That's a trend I see here. The more consistent the character is, the higher up they are on this tier list. So, you know, some of these lower tier characters might have a really high ceiling, but they just might not always get there.
or
Yeah,
they're really
that's
good somewhere else.
You know,
yeah. Like they're good, but there might be better options in Criminal Syndicate. Okay, so let's move on to splash characters. So we each picked our two favorite characters to splash into Criminal Syndicate, and then I threw in Bucky because he's a rogue agent. So, and our very first character is Angela, who is John's pick. So, John, take us away on Angela.
Yeah. Now that we just got done talking about how hard it is to fit in that 5 threat character, um, I do really like Angela. I mean, as a Guardians player, I mean, you can kind of say there's 3 of them on this list, but Angela, she like you said, she has that 2 power at the beginning of turn 1 for that eyes on the prize play, and she is a long mover. And we only had one affiliated long move.
Yep.
So I mean, for that alone, that's huge, but that doesn't really put her at five threat, obviously. Um, but she loves being able to get some of those rerolls. Like if she's rerolling a skull, an attack from Daredevil, that's fantastic. You're maybe not going to get a whole lot of use out of her with Law's leadership, but there might be some synergies there. Just if he's passing people around the board and someone gets close to her and she can do that range 2 attack without having to move first. Um, she just needs a little bit to get going, and then she can just absolutely pop off with the right stimulus there. She's pretty tanky, 4s across the board, and people can't roll or modify dice into her. So if she's standing on a point with Kingpin, it's kind of hard to kill her if she's a little bit more vulnerable and open. Modoc, maybe a little bit less than some of the other leaderships, but I do really like her just kind of across the board as even attrition piece mostly, objective grabbing. But yeah, even if she's your attrition piece in a control setup, I think if she's just running around circles around everybody else just to clean it up while everyone else does the secures, I think she's just a ton of fun to play.
Yeah, she like really fills some holes in the Criminal Syndicate roster, being that she's super fast, like you said, the medium base long move, midline extract steal. So the way I see Angela being played is probably with Kingpin, where she could move up, grab you that middle extract, so then you have an extract lead, and then you also have the like Kingpin leadership advantage. So then you're just starting off on such a good foot. You're having 2 out of 3 extracts, 3 out of 5, whatever. Plus you're counting as double. Yeah, I don't know. She seems really good in this roster. Bob, what are your thoughts on Angela?
Yeah, I'm really glad you suggested her, John. I had never really thought about her in criminals that much until I saw you wanted to talk about her for this video. And I mean, she is a very cool character that does unique things because she's so fast. Um, yeah, the more I think about her, I'm definitely gonna try her out. In some ways, she does like some of the same things that Ulik wants to do, but I almost wonder if she's better at them. She's not as tanky as Ulik, but she steals the midline without a tactics card. Um, she threatens some pretty insane plays turn 1 with being able to move, grab an extract, and then maybe move on to an opponent's back secure that they weren't expecting.
Dude,
And
that's
just
true.
an insane lead turn 1, she's great at cleaning up some weaker characters, and then she can, get a free extra activation after she dazes someone. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak from personal experience, but I could see some definite potential there. And I agree with you, Jim. She does fill some holes in the roster, I think.
Yeah, my main issue with her is that we have 3 5 threat characters in Criminal Syndicate that we all like. So like at what point do we cut Ulik or Modoc for Angela? And I think there's a place for that. It's like, hey, this roster I'm building, I need a fast damage dealing midline extract. And she's perfect for that. So where do we want to rank her? Where do you want to put her, John? Because she was your idea, and we're all kind of feeling good about her.
Yeah, I think the issue we'll get into is that we specifically picked these characters because we thought they were going to be good. So how are they not just all S
Ah,
tier automatically? Um,
that's true.
I would say solid A tier, just because like I love her as a model. Um, but yeah, just being able to fit her into a roster, there's some other things you can do. So you kind of have to go in just A tier just for the fact that you have to go into it wanting to play her. I think.
Yeah.
But if that's something that you want to do, maybe you already have the model from another list. She's definitely a ton of fun to splash here.
Yeah. For this segment of the video, their favorite splashes, like obviously we're gonna like them all. So, don't take the tiers as seriously. It's more just like, S tier is like I'm gonna play them every single time I play Criminal Syndicate, but A tier is like most of the time. B could be like, some of the time I'll try it out. I don't think the tiers matter as much here. It's more just to spark some splash character conversation.
Yeah, these are by no means the only characters you can splash in Criminal Syndicate.
Yeah.
And the bar is so much higher for an unaffiliated character. Um, I think I mean, even if we put Angela in like B tier, that could just be saying, yeah, sometimes she's in your 10 because sometimes she's really good. But, yeah, I think sometimes people build a list with an unaffiliated character that they're not always bringing. That's one of the cool things about Marvel is there's so many options with list building. That's the only time I would put an unaffiliated character in S, I think. I think she's a good role player. Without having tried her out, she feels like she might be um, a B tier, just like someone that you sometimes have in your 10, sometimes don't. But certainly a very
Yeah.
good character. Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I might start putting her in my list just for when I have priority, but we're using their extracts and there's an odd amount. Then I can put her in and be like, all right, I'm going to start off with the, crisis advantage. So what are you going to do about it? So, it like doesn't really matter where we put her, but
Chase down those pesky web warriors.
yeah, she is very good at running people down. But I don't think you would have her and Ulik in the same roster. Yeah. All right. So moving on to someone that I think you might want in every Criminal Syndicate roster is Beta Ray Bill, which was one of Bobby's picks. So Bobby, tell us about Bill.
Yeah, I mean, I think the secret's out that Bill is pretty darn good, and just in general. He's been seeing a lot of play. He's very tanky with the pay power to reduce the damage, which sometimes that superpower is better than the innate damage reduction because if you're taking chip damage, you can reduce to 0, or like a throw damage, you can reduce to 0.
Yeah.
He's got the medium move, medium base, so he's fast. He has the eyes on the prize option for the midline steal. But really, the reason I like him, like really the reason that I take him and like him a lot, is just because of how good he is against the big boys.
Yeah.
He's a great counter to Hulk and Malekith. So I think
Yes.
he's a good role player for that reason. I've fallen into the trap of sometimes being like, oh, Bill's good, I'll take him, but without really a specific reason. And sometimes he has actually kind of underperformed in that situation. So I'm leaning more now towards like, I put him in my 10 because I need him to survive against Malekith and Hulk. And otherwise, I'm usually not taking him. So I'd probably put him top of A tier for that reason.
Um, okay, Bill, let me just tell a quick story. So, John and I were going to this tournament called Cherokee Open, and Bill and Ulik came out like the week before. And I bought the box for Ulik. And I was texting John and I was like, I don't know who my 10th character should be. And I threw in Bill. And Bill like won me that tournament because he's so good. Like, I mean, just like Bobby said, I bring him if they have any chance of bringing Hulk or Malekith because we don't have a lot of good tools to deal with those big boys. And Bill is just like, nah, I'm gonna throw you. I'm gonna God killer you. I'm gonna ruin your day as a 4 threat against your 6 or 7. Um, honestly, I think Bill should be S tier because in June of 2023, when we're filming this, it's a big boy meta, and I want Bill every time. And I'm strongly considering taking him in every game, even though I might not. You're a Guardians player, John, so what do you think of Bill?
Oh, definitely. I just love the thought of him and Rhino together. Like you were talking about, you had a game with like him and Rhino, I think. And between the two of them on a B-shaped map, they're just flipping everything all the time. Like they just have
Yeah,
so much movement, like, so much more than you would expect, and they're just not dying. And he
right.
is gonna put out the damage on the other side of that as well and hold his own. Um, yeah, I have a hard time not putting him in S tier.
Yeah. He also lets us play eyes on the prize, which is great. I don't think you need that card, but if that's part of your game plan, he turns that on. I mean, Bill is fantastic. You know, we don't need to carry on about it, but all right. So my first pick is Juggernaut, who for a long time was my favorite splash character in Criminal Syndicate. Like he was in every roster, but I feel like lately he's been falling off a little bit. And maybe it's this issue we've been talking about with the five threats. It's like, hey, now we have Ulik, Claw, Angela, and classic Modoc. So he's not an auto take like he used to be, but he's still very good. And something we need to talk about is Juggernaut versus Ulik because they do very similar things. And I know Bobby has a lot of thoughts about this. So do you want to take over, Bob?
Yeah, I personally think you should take Juggernaut instead of Ulik, which is probably a controversial opinion. But Juggernaut with his 8 dice attack, he moves and adds 3 to his attack, so he ends up with 8 dice. He just hits that wild trigger for the push so much more consistently than Ulik.
Yes.
Um, and he really is like tankier than Ulik. Not a lot tankier, but I think he is tankier. He's got the immunity to superpower pushes or mystic attack pushes, which if you see that your opponent is like on Web Warriors or maybe has like Ebony Maw or something, is pretty wild. And then his tactics card is just so good.
Yeah.
I mean, even just the threat of, hey, I can throw someone long. I think he's better than Ulik in Criminal Syndicate. So to me, he's at least a high A, probably A tier.
Yeah. He also is just more consistent than Ulik because he just has to move to get that 3 power to then move again, where Ulik needs to like deal some damage, which I know Ulik gets 2 power a turn that we didn't really talk about, but he needs to deal a damage on his strike to get to that crucial 3rd power for the throw or charge. So right now, I think I'm taking Juggernaut over Ulik, but it's something to think about a lot because they're very similar roles, but just like Bobby said, Juggernaut's tactics card might push him over the edge for me. And I know we put leader Modoc pretty low, but Juggernaut is great with him with the 8 dice pool. He's like likely to get the wild. He has a lot of defense dice, so he's likely to get the wild there. So yeah. All right. So let's move on to Lizard, who, to no one's surprise, is a great splash character in Criminal Syndicate, which actually, not to like call you out, John, but when I was making the tier list for this video and said Lizard was going to be one of my splash choices,
I
John thought Lizard was a Criminal Syndicate
was like, how are you splashing him? I thought he was. Because like
because
he was in so many syndicate lists, I just assumed that he was.
yeah, but it's for good reason. So tell us more about Lizard, John.
Yeah, kind of what I had in my head talking about Crossbones was just kind of why don't you have Lizard was why
Yeah,
Crossbones was low. It was just He is so much fun to play. Very first game of MCP that you kind of like taught me with. He he just he just was so good. He was just like instrumental to that success, and um, he's playing objectives well. He's not dying. He doesn't love to hit, I guess, but he can when he needs to with his spender there. He's got a pretty good throw. And the wall crawler is always super helpful on those characters. Yeah, I mean he's everything I want Crossbones to be.
No, poor
Oh
Crossbones.
man, poor
I
Crossbones.
don't want to talk
He's
about
pretty beat up.
your splash option, just crapping on someone else, but
Yeah,
I mean that's really just how like he is just kind of what you want that 3 threat to be.
yeah. One thing I want to say quickly about splash characters in general in Criminal Syndicate is they're very good because we don't have a lot of tactics cards that require syndicate characters. So you're comfortable taking 2 out of 5 of your characters being splashes. So I mean, John's right. It's like, why would you take crossbows if you could just take lizard? I don't lose anything on my tactics cards. Lizard can bring a great tactics card. Um, and just to say more about Lizard is he is my midline extract grabber if I don't have a safe play. I'm like comfortable throwing him up there and he'll probably survive. And if they put a lot of resources into him to daze him, that's fine with me. Do you like Lizard, Bob? You still taking him in rosters? Is he S
Oh yeah,
tier?
yeah. Lizard's S tier for sure. He's an honorary criminal syndicate member. Um, I think he plays so well with Kingpin's leadership. Um, I mean, he ticks every single box that you think about for an unaffiliated character. Like he he's great with the leadership. Um, he threatens that I'm going to double move onto your own secure play turn one, which it could be so threatening. Um, he helps with some of the things the affiliation is lacking in terms of he's fast, which a lot of the criminal syndicate characters are not. Like you said, Jim, he's great moving up onto the midline. He gives great counterplay to Mystique, actually. Because that's something so prominent in the meta right now is you're afraid to come up to the midline and grab an extract because Mystique will pull you in and then your character will die and you gave him an extract and it's a disaster. And Lizard can just move up and stand next to that extract and not even pick it up. And then your next activation could be coming up and grabbing it, and now you're safe from deception. And like you said, if they do put a lot of resources into trying to kill him, it's like, okay, great. All my other characters are not being attacked now. Healing factor plus the damage reduction. Yeah, he's good. The only thing he doesn't do well is do damage, which is fine. So.
All right. Yeah. Lizard is great. I mean, he should be considered in every Criminal Syndicate roster. But here's one that might surprise a lot of you, and I personally love. So Nick Fury Sr. and the Howling Commandos. Bobby Bobby mentioned this to me like a year ago before like a couple TTS seasons ago. And the first game I tried it, I was just blown away. So, Bobby, please tell us about the spicy pick of Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos.
Yeah, I think since Vincent won LVO with Shield, people have been looking at him a lot more. But I still think he's underappreciated. Um, he's got that medium move, medium base, which is always excellent. He's a little on the squishier side, but he has stealth to help with that. And then I think what really makes him special is his movement superpower. So he can either move himself within 1 of someone within range of 2 of him, or he can move them. Like if a character is range 2 away, he can move them within range 1 of himself. Which specifically in Criminal Syndicate, can really help shore up one of our main weaknesses, which is strong characters who hate being thrown. Sometimes a throw feels like a stagger when you're playing Criminal Syndicate because you just got to move back and it kind of sucks. And he really, really can help with that weakness where you say, oh, okay, I don't mind that you threw me because now I have Nick Fury here to just move me right back and I still get to do everything I want to do. And he's does great damage. He's great with Daredevil. He gets multiple attacks on his spender. He's got an auto incinerate. He's got the got your back for even more damage. So he does a lot of good incremental damage over the game. I think he's just a good, well-rounded addition that is mostly there to shore up the team's weaknesses.
That's why he's so good in Criminal Syndicate. Like literally all 4 leaders can't move themselves without an action. So Nick Fury Sr. is honestly good with all of them. Like I think mostly Claw and Kingpin. Because he can move them up. I mean, he could literally save them entire turns of the game. Whereas they'd be double moving. He just does a 2-cost superpower to move them very far because they have such large bases. Plus, he has stealth randomly, so he can just sit on a home point and blast away and not worry about it. Do you like Nick Fury, John? Where do you think we should rank him?
I mean, I probably would have said A tier, but he wrecked me fairly recently, so I'll say S. I mean, it's just 1 threat per Howling Commando there on the model.
Yeah.
They for the price that you're paying for them, they are so good. They kind of do everything you want out of all of the leaderships. I'm actually gonna go S tier just because I think we're gonna be seeing him for a long time. He's got that lockjaw teleport off of him, or storm hop if you want to call it. He's got the attrition. He's got the stealth to sit on a point, or not necessarily contesting on the point, but someone has to come to him to move him. For 3 threat, it's just an amazing value for what you're getting.
For sure.
Yeah. And the only other thing I'll throw out about him, he can make it hard for your opponent to come up to the midline. Because if he's sitting next to like Modoc, for example, if they come up and grab that extract, he can move up within range 2 of Modoc, attack once, automatically get the power to then move Modoc up. And now Modoc is double tapping
halfway up the board.
Yeah, like Modoc's like way up the board, and he can like attack you once, bow you closer, attack you again, throw something at you, daze you, take your extract. It's a little bit almost like the Mystique Thanos combo of pulling someone in and murdering them. So that's a pretty powerful thing that he can do that people don't really see coming. So
yeah, please try him out, guys. He's so much fun. He's just so flexible. But all right, moving on to Rocket Raccoon. John, as a resident Guardians player, as we've mentioned, Rocket's your go-to 2-threat after Bullseye, or are you taking him before Bullseye, or what's the deal?
Probably not before Bullseye, but I think he has a lot to offer. I think having two threats in a list can be very powerful. It gives you a little bit of, a little bit of a trade-off there. You kind of have some options. I think it's important to be able to. I think you're ending up wanting your 2-threat a lot of the time, and I think it's good to have at least a second option there. He's a little bit more damage focused than Bullseye. He's not really going as much for the chip damage, but he has very strong, very long reach guns. He has cover all the time, which really makes him way tankier than you would expect, which is very helpful for his very, very small pool. But then my other favorite thing here with criminals is his booby traps. Having those booby traps like you would have on Mysterio and Goblin, having that for just that 2-threat on someone that kind of has a lot of power a lot of the time. Just because he's sitting back double tapping more often than not, so he has that power to, if there's a big scrum in the middle for a point, he can be just outside of it and setting off explosions in the middle of it, just causing chaos. So I definitely like the synergies there. On the control game, control through attrition. Uh, Plus, rerolls are always good for him. He's uh, easy to daze for Claw if someone gets up on him and decides to go after him. I'm really trying to find a downside with any of the leaderships, but not really seeing a whole lot. He's a 2 threat, so there's the obvious downsides there, but I definitely feel like he could be a solid like low A tier
Do you
splash.
think you need to bring Groot with him, or is it viable to bring him on his own?
Honestly, you should have Groot in every list. But I think the criminals have that 3 threat um, outside of Groot. I think Rocket, for what he is, he's gonna get you your money's worth out of that 2 threat. Even if he dies early-ish, I think he can still make a huge impact. Just maybe he's just keeping everyone off of a point. If they say, "Oh, I just took some damage from uh, whoever," I don't want to necessarily jump onto this point right away because Rocket's sitting on 3 power. Uh, you know, maybe again raises some questions. So yeah, and not necessarily the going for the deadly duo there, unless you really wanted to. They are a good 5 threat character.
Yeah, you said some really interesting things there, John. The booby traps, you can catch your opponent in a terrible situation with that where they risk the mid activation days and then they just can't move within range of your booby trap, which is such a nasty situation to be caught in. And you mentioned him under Claw. The go wide team with Claw, that there might be some real potential there. Like I said, we haven't tried it out yet, but the more I think about it, a team with a bunch of 3 and 2 threats under Claw that's focused on damage, that might be pretty nasty.
Yeah, Bullseye, Nebula, Rocket, and you're just like for 1 6 threat character, you're just getting so much out of it.
Yeah, I think honestly, this has really got me thinking. Like, just imagine Claw, Bullseye, Rocket, plus whoever. It's like if they kill your Rocket or Bullseye, you don't care because your 5 threat leader is moving around, doing his tactics card. I don't know. Plus, Rocket is very good with Shadowland Daredevil. Like that is a nasty like consistency boost. 5 dice for H5. Like Rocket's gun is insane for a 2 threat. That's the same as Cable's. I mean, Cable is very bad, but yeah, Rocket is great. My only thing with him, I like do love Toad in Criminal Syndicate. So my go-to splash 2 threat is Toad, but I think Rocket needs to see more play. I think John's right on this. Like for me, it's probably Bullseye, Toad, and then Rocket, but I definitely want to try that Claw team. Okay, then finally for our splash characters, we have Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. He is great. He's good with all the leaders. I don't know who wants to talk about him. Like he's so great.
uh, Bucky under Daredevil is probably the best character in the game to be holding a hammer. I think if you're taking Daredevil, you got to have Bucky. It's just such an insane combination. He's S tier to me. I I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about. He's one of the most consistent damage dealers in the game. He gets a ton of power and then he hops around and gets wherever he wants to be. He's just he doesn't really bring a lot of control outside of his spender. So you're mostly taking him when you need to do damage more. But he's very, very good at that.
Yeah. Sometimes he's almost like a 3-threat rocket in some ways.
You can take both. I mean, like
Just
I said,
hit them from anywhere on the map.
yeah, I mean, dude, maybe Bucky is the piece for Claw because Bucky, as that rogue agent, you don't even need to take criminals. Shoot, you take Claw, Bucky, Bullseye, Rocket. What is that? 4, 7, that's 12. Throw in. I mean, you could throw in whoever at that point. You could splash, Bill or Juggernaut or I don't know. I mean, we all know how good Bucky is, and he's a rogue agent, and he's specifically amazing with Shadowland Daredevil. Like, even if I'm building a like Kingpin focused team with this Daredevil splash, I still consider Bucky for those games. Do you guys have anything more to say about him, or should we move on?
No, just that I'm getting pretty hyped for this Claw team. I like
That's next
so
up.
so yeah, Claw, Bucky, Bullseye. That's 10, and you have 3 Criminal Syndicate characters.
No, that's yeah. That is 10.
And then like, yeah, I mean, Nick Fury Sr. to double up on the Got Your Back, Rocket.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, this team, I'm trying it out, man. I'm trying it out.
Claw has such a good model. Like, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm not excited to paint it, but I'm excited to see it.
Sinning crossbows in that team. No, maybe not. Probably Hood.
Specifically for them to die, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our splash characters. There's obviously a ton of characters you could splash. One of which I love is Thanos. Thanos is fantastic in Criminal Syndicate. I've had a lot of success with that. But okay, so let's wrap up here. I know it's running a little long, but we're putting out some content. We're gonna bang through these tactics cards, not spend a whole lot of time on them, but we're starting out with aim lackeys, which I think is one of the reasons to play Modoc, because I mean the new aim Modoc can't even play this card, which is probably just wrong. But you love this card, right, Bob?
I love this card. I almost always bring it when I bring Modoc. It helps shore up a Criminal Syndicate weakness, which is being slow. So yeah, I just, I think it's part of the reason that Modoc is slept on these days.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can use the extra movement on anybody. Like it benefits anybody. It like doesn't matter. All right, moving on. Possibly the best criminal syndicate card, Steel Priority for 10 power.
Is very good. I mean, there's easier ways to do it, but restricted. Like follow me. But yeah, it's just nuts. I mean, you're breaking one of like the core rules of the game there. It's just nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, Jim, why don't you just put these cards in tiers as we talk about them, and then we can go back and if we see any major changes we want to make, we can mention it.
That sounds
But yeah, this effect, it's unique. It's one of the reasons to play Criminal Syndicate. It can really be backbreaking to your opponent. Like if they're taking a 3 tall list and trying to keep priority every turn, and you say, nope, I just can play this card and it's mine no matter what. It's a really busted card. Definitely better if you're leaning more towards attrition. Sometimes Kingpin likes going last. Sometimes it can be awkward if you got Bucky keeping you affiliated and you don't actually have that many Criminal Syndicate characters in your roster for that game. Sometimes it turns into not as easy of a card to play. And I'm the master of pumping 10 power into it and then like whiffing on my attacks on my on my activation that I stole with it. But no, it's a very, very good card. It also has cool synergy with Gwen's new card that lets you not even take it in your 5, and then if you see the opportunity, you can pull it in, and the timing works out really well. So
Yeah. This card is worth spending the time on because it's one of the main reasons to play Criminal Syndicate. And one thing that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot is like you could play this as early as turn 2, and that might let you keep priority for the entire game. It's not just one turn. It could end up being multiple turns because I mean just the way the game works and dazing and all that. And I think one thing you need to think about when building your Criminal Syndicate roster is, do I have enough Criminal Syndicate characters to play this card? Which I think why Rhino is so good because he generates power like a madman. Like Rhino starts his turn with 3 power, does everything he wants to do, and ends up with 6 power. And then you
yeah,
just need 4 more power randomly elsewhere to steal priority and have Rhino pop off again. Like this card has so much nuance to it. It takes a lot of practice because there are times where it's wrong to play the card, even though generally you're not really doing something wrong if you play it. But yeah, just a fantastic card. Which,
yeah.
or what's up, Bob?
I just to elaborate on what you said about it stealing priority for multiple turns. If you and your opponent both are like 4 wide or 5 wide, and priority is going to go back and forth a lot just based on like a single daze, you can easily end up in that situation where you're just trading dazes off, and your opponent would have had priority the whole game if you didn't steal it round 2. Then the other thing that can happen is you have an insane turn where you happen to really spike. Maybe your opponent dazed multiple of your characters, and you came back and dazed like 3 of theirs, and then they should have priority next round to catch back up. And then you say, no, I'm pressing the advantage. I'm going to play this card and KO your character who had 10 power on them. And now the game's over, So,
Yeah. Something else with this card. Okay, final point. I know we said we're not spending a lot of time on tactics cards, but one thing I love doing is when I have Bill and they have like Hulk or Modoc or Juggernaut, is I go last with Bill to throw the medium, steal priority, throw the medium again. So they're like way out in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do, and they no longer have priority. All right. But flipping to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have bounty hunters, which I absolutely hate this card. I don't know why you would ever bring this. Like, honestly, it's like F tier. Do you guys have any reason to play this? Like, you have to have either Taskmaster or Electra, who
Electra.
we both rated very low. I mean,
No,
give me one reason to play bounty hunters.
there's some. I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe there's some synergy there with. I don't know. I was gonna say Claw.
Like, you
Yeah, I'm
just
reading
mark
it
the
again,
enemy
and
character, you have to daze them. It's just rough.
I mean, if you're gonna daze or KO, I'd rather be going with like a Killmonger, usurp the throne. You're gonna get so much more out of it than this.
Yeah,
yeah, I had to reread it just now. I know I've read it in the past, but it's not a card I ever think about. It's trash. I maybe for
yeah,
like narrative reasons you could play it, but yeah.
yeah. It's on bad characters and it's bad, so
Yeah.
there's no reason to take it. Carbonadium synthesizer. I like do think this is a good card, and it has some synergy with actually the very next card, Cruel Tutelage. It lets Omega Red remove status conditions and gain power, and it's completely free. So I feel like if you love that character, there's no reason not to take this card. So
Yeah, we put Omega Red kind of low, but if you're taking him, I think it's a good card because he's gonna end up with status conditions. He's gonna give them to himself sometimes, I think. But I think this has a ton of uses in like a Hydra situation, maybe. Um, but I mean, if I'm taking Omega Red, I think I'm probably taking that card.
yeah, I'm on the same page. But it like does pair very well with Cruel Tutelage because Cruel Tutelage you could play it on him, get the stagger, and then use the other card to remove the stagger and get power, which I know is a 2-card combo. But if you're playing Cruel Tutelage anyways, then maybe there's something there. But I don't think too highly of Cruel Tutelage. It gives you 3 extra dice, but if you get a skull and that attack, you become staggered. Do you guys like this card or no?
Um, Daredevil's Advocate, I kind of like it under Shadowland just because, if there's just that one skull roll, you can re-roll it just to kind of it helps a little bit, but you get a second skull and it's over. um, but I think that's probably the only place I'd consider it is under Daredevil.
It is also decent with Modoc Scientist Supreme because he loves the big dice pools to get the wild.
Hmm.
And maybe on Claw, you could do it on one of your weak characters that you don't care if they're staggered. Like a 2-threat being staggered isn't as big of a deal, but they're throwing out an 8 dice energy attack.
Hmm.
So I think it's worth considering. I like do rarely play it. Okay, moving on to a card I love though is Cruelty. I always want to find room for Cruelty, but sometimes I just can't. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, me and you go back on this card all the time. When it's clutch, it is super clutch. Part of Marvel is leaving that character you really had to daze on 1 health and
Yeah.
losing the game because of it. And this card really helps buffer against that happening. It's also a mystic attack, which is very good against certain affiliations. Um, I think it's always in contention for like the 9th or 10th slot in the list.
Yeah. When I find I have too many like character specific cards and I'm gonna run into like squad building issues with tactics cards, I throw in Cruelty as a card I can always play, and I will be able to use it every game. Like I never feel bad about having it and has a relevant effect. Okay, so Hood's Gang. This card looks phenomenal on paper, but in practice, it's pretty awkward because Hood basically has to activate first if you want to get value out of this card. So it has to be played on his turn and he has to be in normal form. But it does stack quite a bit. I mean, with Shadowland Daredevil, you get 2 rerolls, which is pretty phenomenal. What do you guys think of this one? I'm thinking B or C.
I would lean
I think
towards C, but it's one of those. I mean, a lot of tactics cards you can kind of talk yourself into, but like in this scenario, this would be so good. Um,
Yeah,
like you said, Hood does not really want to go first, which is the whole point of the card. So
yeah.
I tend to lean towards C on that one.
The only
It does
time
have good
Hood wants to
synergy.
go first is when he's on his possessed side and he has power for a charge and you can get a daze. So like maybe you could charge while possessed, daze somebody, flip back to normal, and then play Hood's Gang.
Hmm.
But it's so specific and it literally might never come up. So I just don't think it's worth it, even though it looks great. Now, moving on to a card for sitting crossbones. I do actually rate this card very highly, and I think it's a reason to play center crossbones, this tech card, because it gives you a range 5 energy for 1 power, and it auto incinerates the target and everyone within 2, I believe. So if you love sitting crossbones like me, I think you should play this card with them. So honestly, I might even put it in A tier just because I'm always taking it if I bring Sinner crossbows. Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but
Maybe a little bit. I love this the two of them in Hydra. I love it there for sure.
yeah, maybe
Um,
it's not that high.
I agree. It's an excellent card when you're taking those characters. Um, it's really easy access to incinerate, which is really nice. I think it's a solid card. I think it kind of depends on how we're ranking the cards. I think it's fine to look at it only in the context of I already decided I'm taking this character. Now I'll think about the card.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder if Hood's Gang could be cool in this go wide claw list we're talking about. Again, all hypothetical, but
yeah, he is a lower threat.
That is a good point, Bob. You know, in that list, you probably don't want Claw going first, actually, because you want your characters to die during the round so he can move around to where he wants to be and then activate. So maybe you're fine with Hood going first. That's really interesting. Okay, moving on to a wild card, the famous shell game, Mind Games for Modoc. Tell me about Mind Games.
So just to recap real quick, Modoc comes with 5 tokens. You split them into 2 piles. 2 of them are damage tokens, 2 of them are power tokens, and one of them is a victory point token. And your opponent picks a pile, not knowing which tokens you put in each pile. And if they flip the victory point, they get the points. If they don't flip it, you get the points. And then if they flip damage and power, they take damage and you gain power. So it's one of the probably maybe the coolest tactics card in the game.
But is it good?
When it wins you the game, it's pretty good. I think, I think everyone should play this card at least once. I doubt it's going to be a consistent tournament winner, but
It can be nice if you're already ahead. If you're ahead, say 2 VP, and maybe you're sitting at like 14, or you will be sitting at 14 at the end of the round. Like, for whatever reason, I was thinking that you had to be down on VP, but I don't think you do. So if you have at least a 2 VP buffer, which you might playing criminals, maybe it is good to use it there, because if they gain 1 VP on you, you might not be too concerned about that.
One major issue is that you have to be within range 2, which is not really where Modoc wants to be. But
if you're winning the game anyway.
Yeah. Super fun card, maybe not competitive. All right, moving to No Mercy. This is always another generic card that I want to use, but I just never find room. I think it's fine. You just have to daze somebody, you can get 3 power. Is that
I
worth a
like it.
tactics card?
I like it better than Cruel Tutelage personally.
Okay.
It can give you some snowbally turns. It is awkward. Like, you never want your plan to be like, I need to daze you, but at some point during the game, an opportunity for a good turn will probably come up with this.
Yeah, and it's not the character that's doing the dazing, right? Like, when an allied character would daze an enemy character, the allied character plays this card. Oh no, it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
read it
Whoever
wrong.
did the dazing.
So like, it
has
might
to
be
plan.
the card that makes Electra viable here. Maybe it puts her like low C tier.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh,
One turn, she's good. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, you could use it with bounty hunters and her too.
2 cards on
Okay.
Electra.
Yeah, worth it. Okay, moving on to try this one. This is Gwenpool's signature card. I know Bobby has a lot to say about this.
Yeah, so I think this card is really cool. And I think specifically in Criminal Syndicate, 2 of your best affiliated cards are All According to Plan and Shadow Org, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And both of them are played in the power phase. And this card gets played in the cleanup phase. Lets you swap with a tactics card you didn't take, so that it works perfectly timing wise with both those cards. I don't think you need to take it in your 10 if you're taking Gwenpool. I think she's fine without it. I think you're going to want a lot of practice if you're planning on trying to do this in a competitive setting, because you're gonna need to know, okay, this situation, this is what I'm going to do with it. Like, don't try to figure it out on the fly. It's a very, very high level card. I think the whole community is going to have to practice with it more to really see how good it is. Is it worth the slot, or are you better off just knowing your 5 on turn 0 and just picking them correctly? But I think it's got a lot of cool potential. I want to practice with it more.
Do you think it's worth giving up the 10th slot? Because basically you're playing with 9 cards, but you have options open. Do you think that matters or no?
I think it matters a lot. I think we've all been there. We took Brace for Impact and our opponent didn't take the throwing character we thought they would, and then like Shadow Ward, for example, you might look at the board and say, okay, all my characters happen to be outside of range 2 right now. I think this is going to be great. It I think if you're playing Criminal Syndicate to their highest potential and you've learned them really well, I think this is in your 10.
Okay.
If you have Gwenpool, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Psychic Fortress for Modoc, which is he pays 3 power, he gets cover, and everyone within range 4 also gains cover. You don't see this card a whole lot, but I feel like it might be worth a second look. Do you like it, John?
As a Guardians player, I hate it. It's almost like because like I talked about when we went over Modoc's card. I love to just be able to go up and hit him with everything at once just to shut him down, and that's really gonna hinder that. It's not nearly as effective as like Shadow Organization, but it can be huge if Modoc is your game plan, and if you're going to put him in a slightly risky situation, or if he's more in the middle and there's people around him that can get this, because it is range 4. So I think if you're taking Modoc, it can be an option. It kind of just depends on what the rest of your squad looks like.
Yeah. One thing I don't like is that we have aim lackeys really high, and I don't like taking 2 character specific cards in the same roster. And I like aim lackeys more than Psychic Fortress. So that's probably why I never take Psychic Fortress, but maybe I should. All right, next up is Rhino in a China shop, which is the exact issue I just said of Rhino having a vastly superior card. Uh, do you guys see any value in this card? Is it just a narrative card?
If you're splashing him in like a Brotherhood, I guess, like something that's more terrain focused anyway, I love that. I mean, I do like it. It has a lot of fun plays with Rhino. I don't know that it's as useful for Syndicate though. Maybe Spider Foes might get a little bit more out of it. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing that holds it back for me is that he takes 2 damage at the end of the activation.
Yeah.
That is rough. If it wasn't for that, I would be a lot more excited about it. Because it does have potential to give you some pretty insane amounts of dice. But the 2 damage really that's a bit of a deal breaker for me, because there's going to be times where you just can't play it because of that.
You can time his days with the claw leadership.
I wish you
there you
could.
go.
Big brain.
I think that only triggers off of enemy effects, doesn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Shoot.
Um,
Messed up the synergy.
Small brain.
So I think it's a C tier. I think you can have a lot of fun with it. I think you should play it. It's just, it gets pushed out by other cards.
Yeah. All right, next up is Rocket Troll, which I have mixed feelings on this card because it's like, why would I bring Rock Control to move Ulik range 5 when I can just use his superpower to move him range 5 or similar? But there are some circumstances where doing it outside of Ulik's turn is very relevant, which makes me put it in B tier because it's fine, but not my favorite.
I'd probably go A tier. It's definitely, I would put it more in like the list of turn 1 shenanigans cards more often than not. Like
But like, how do we get Ulik that 3rd power?
in Syndicate.
Yeah. He'd have to like move up and take damage and then fly off to an enemy point or something.
Yeah, that is a good point. So in Syndicate specifically, I think B tier might be fine.
Yeah, maybe high B.
Yeah. I do really like the out of activation move. I think it can create some really difficult situations for your opponent. If you're taking this and Eyes on the Prize, you're starting to kind of stress your tactics card slots. So it can be hard to always fit it in, but I think it's a solid card.
Yeah.
Maybe under like a Kingpin end of the round. Maybe some days happen that you weren't counting on, and you just need to go clean up a different point. and he can just be anywhere he wants and just hops to another point.
That's probably the best use for it, and it does suck he has to drop his extracts. Whereas with his superpower, he can hold on to anything he wants. So I think high end of B is fair. Okay, now this might be a hot take and maybe surprise some people, but I think Shadow Work should be S tier because I I like put this in all my rosters now because like every criminal syndicate character loves just turning off attacks and it throws off the other player's plan so hard because they've been planning their whole turn. They're like, all right, I'm gonna stand here, make a range 4 attack, it's gonna be great. And then suddenly they can't do that and they have to move into range 2 and waste actions. Maybe I'm hyping it too much.
No, you hit me with that the first time I played Syndicate with my Guardians, and I was like, turn 2 Deadly Duo, here we go. And you're like, actually, it just
Pop the
ruined
Shadow
my
Work.
day. I mean, if you're playing against an attrition team like some sort of gun line, absolutely, it is well worth the S tier.
Yeah, I think this card is underappreciated, and you've really sold me on this card, over the last year. I agree, it's S tier. Um, yeah, it's not talked about enough. It is a pretty broken card. I don't think you take it every game. Certain teams are pretty good at charging into close range, but some of the best teams out there right now, like Guardians, Shield, really hate this card. So I think you always want it.
Just imagine the Claw team. Like Claw, Hood, Bullseye can all shoot you, but you can't shoot back.
But don't you want to get hit?
Well, you don't necessarily want to get hit, but if you get hit, it's a benefit, kind of like Sand, right?
No, I'm pretty sure Claw wants to be tabled.
Yeah, that's Claw's end goal. But all right, moving on to a card I'd honestly forgotten existed till I was making this tier list is Shuriken Arashi, which for people that don't know, Shadowland Daredevil can spend 2 power, is that right?
Hmm.
To make this 10 dice attack that you can measure the range off the ninjas, but the other player gets to move short. If they move into cover, the attack suddenly becomes 5 dice. And I think the intent of this card is to get the other player to like move off of a point or put them in a bad position. But I think the main issue here is that the other player has the agency. It's like I don't get to control where they move. They might even end up moving into a better location, and I'm making a 5 dice attack that still takes one of Daredevil's actions. It's like I think it's pretty bad, probably deep here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if even if it was more power and you could control them, like that would be night and day difference.
Right, because like there are times Shadowlight Daredevil doesn't have anything to spend his power on, and he would happily, pay power to move an enemy character.
yeah. There's just way too many things that have to go right for this to actually get you the 10 dice attack.
You
From
even
having
need the
your
ninjas in play, which
yeah,
sometimes you just don't have the ninjas, and this card is useless.
yeah, like Daredevil, he needs to have the power. He has to either summon the ninjas that turn or they're in the right position. Either has to be no
Yeah.
terrain
There's
within
just too much going
range.
on.
I
It's
like
like too many
AM
hoops to jump through.
yeah, like AMG designed some really cool cards. And this isn't to say you should never use this card. Like it could still be really fun and you could even come up with some cool narrative rules for it, but it's not a good card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Another really cool card is Simpleton. I'll do it myself for Modoc. I I really like this card, and I've tried building like lists around it, but it's really held back by the fact that you have to be down on VP. And I think part of the criminal syndicate identity is getting the VP lead and holding on to it. So you never want to be in that situation. But then there's the obvious downside of you KO the character. So you have to hold it till late game. Modoc still has to be, undazed or on the battlefield. I know it's like another one where there's too many hoops to jump through for not a great payoff.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That having to be down on VP really limits its usage. Um, I there's going to be some games where it's like clutch,
Yeah, I
where it
mean
wins
there are
you the
some
game.
games where it'll win you the
Uh,
game,
yeah, but
but
yeah,
You have to from the get-go, you have to plan on losing,
right,
which is
it's
like
like
antithetical to like the rest of your game plan. So
yeah, it's like why not just get the lead and use a card to build a bigger lead instead of trying to dig out of a hole.
why wouldn't
There
you
is,
rather just have mind games?
yeah, I mean, mind games is more fun. It can win you the game, you know. But there is some weird stuff you could do with like Ultron that I kind of want to try, but that is not like a competitive thing. Okay, but one card that I do think is very good is Claw specific card, Supersonic Annihilator. John, tell us about this Claw card and your Claw team you're building.
This is just like an absolutely wild move. I love the idea of it. It's just an area 5 attack.
It's the
So
first of the game.
yeah, it's mental. It's just going to hit everything basically. I mean, it's not gonna hit everyone, but if you've got him up where you want him and he's more like in the middle of the scrum and he's just in the thick of it, he's just gonna hit everyone with 6 dice attacks. It's 5 power, so it's on the expensive side, but I mean it's not too unrealistic to say that's just 1 power for a person that he's hitting, you know? I mean, even if you're only hitting 3 people with it, that's still huge. 3 6 dice attacks. Um, yeah, I love the idea of it. It's definitely playing well with his leadership of getting him up there outside of activation so that he can be in range to hit everyone. And it doesn't take much to get him in range for this attack.
yeah. Initially it seems like it might only be good if your opponent's really wide, but it does hand out that stun condition, which can be pretty important against certain characters. I think you always want this in your 10 if you've got claw.
Yeah, that's what I think too. And obviously you're not trying to get your characters killed, but it does deal a damage to an ally. So like, wait, no, that doesn't work. Where you could like harm an ally, move to get
Because
into the
it
range
is
5.
it is an enemy
Yeah.
effect, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. But I have seen people make the argument of like, why would I bring this card when I already have the crazy beam on Claw's card?
You
And
don't
I
want
would
an area
say,
5 and a beam 5?
yeah, exactly. It's like, what if I don't have the beam lined up? I'll hit everybody instead of two characters.
Hit
But
them.
okay,
Yeah, you can hit them with the area to stun them and then hit them with the beam.
there you go.
Well, although that is 10 power.
I
You do have to
mean,
spend. Yeah, you do have to dump 10 power to do that back to back.
Claw gains power for his damage dealt, right? I mean, he has a
Um,
6 die energy.
yeah,
It's not that crazy, and he has a lot of health. So if he gets dazed and wakes up, he could like burn the world. All right, moving on to the Grand Illusion. I
S tier.
actually, I mean, for Thief, it's S tier, but I actually don't like this card very much. I have tried it quite a bit. I feel like Mysterio is already kind of power hungry, and this is 4 power.
Hmm.
And then I've had so many games where I played the card, he's like in the middle of everything, and then the other player just like throws him into nowhere. So, do you guys think higher of it than I do?
I think so. I mean, I played against it recently, and like that was huge against Guardians not being able to do all that, and yeah, I think there's just the recency bias there of it. It recently wrecked me. I do like it for Mysterio if he is key to your game plan. If he is going to be up in the middle and like in the thick of it, um, I think it's definitely worth taking if that's the route you're going.
All
Yeah,
right.
you make a good point, Jim, about the throw potentially countering the card. Um, it is a very strong effect, and it plays to Mysterio's strengths of just dominating the zone that he's in, which I think makes it pretty good. I think Gamma is probably Mysterio's best crisis, and this is insane on Gamma.
Researcher is one that we're playing that he's good on.
Yeah, Researcher too. Yeah. Um, you know, I think you don't have to take it if you take Mysterio. So for that reason, maybe it's a high B. The ceiling on it is very high. I recently rolled 3 crits on an attack under Mysterio's Grand Illusion bubble, and it felt pretty insane.
Yeah. Like the card's crazy. There's
yeah,
just situations where it goes wrong. And part of it is like I only want Mysterio in certain situations. So do I want to use up one of my 10 cards on a character I'm only taking, every so often?
yeah.
But it is a great card. One other great card, they say keep your enemies close. This is Gwenpool's card. This seems very strong.
Yeah, I love this. Like, especially since she has range 4 attacks, it definitely, you have the option of just pulling people completely away from where they want to be. There's always the other way around. If you're within 1, you can hit them without them rolling any defense dice. But I think in criminals specifically, you definitely want to use it more, moving people off of points. I think and you can just reach out and grab them from a completely separate secure point,
Yeah, this card is super good. I think when it came out, people were like a little scared. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's like deception all over again. It moves you even farther than deception." I will say the 3 power cost goes a long way towards balancing it. Gwenpool doesn't generate a ton of power, and she has a lot of really good ways to spend her power. So I think it is like a balanced card because you're choosing this versus like a range 3 place, which is super good, versus rerolling 3 dice, which is super good, versus like a pretty strong spender. So I think you want it in your 10 always if you have Gwenpool. It could sometimes win you the game if it places a character way out of position. And it can give you that clutch days too with the ignoring defense dice. So I think definitely A tier is a good spot for it.
Yeah, because I mean, she can do the place within 1. They roll no defense, or if you're not going to kill them, just move them away. Would you rather have it or the no? Try this one for Gwenpool.
So I'm still in the learning phase with Gwenpool, so I think I'm keeping the enemies close more often. But I do wonder 6 months from now, maybe no try this will be in the list. And not keep your enemies close because like you said, it's a big ask to have 2 character required cards in your 10. I think out of all the criminal syndicate characters, this is the one time where I might play both in a list of 10. But yeah.
All right. And then possibly the best card in this whole list is this is a robbery. This is Rhino's card. It's an extract steal. It's a throw. This card's bonkers. Like this is one of the reasons to play Rhino.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the only time is just make sure you don't play it on Researcher because I've seen people just automatically bring this with Rhino. It does nothing on Researchers, so just keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, I think you take it every single game you bring Rhino. There's probably not much debate.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean top S tier. All right. To Ash and Cinder, this is a card I love that I've had a lot of fun with. I don't think I would ever take it competitively, to be honest. It's like randomly good at holding down a section of the board because it's like it's a ticking time bomb. If they end up within 2 of it, they take 2 damage, which this can be played by Crossbones, and he can negate a damage to only take 1. So you're like not being as hurt badly by it, but I think their other card is much better if you're taking Cinder Crossbones. You guys have any quick thoughts on this one?
You have to take center crossbones. So
Yeah. I think we
Yeah.
put it at the bottom is C.
So Jim, you would generally take illicit tech before you would take this?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's a big ask to take both of these. So yeah,
Yeah. All right. Usurp the Throne is a great card if you're bringing Killmonger. I think it's easily A tier. I mean, you're getting extra dice, you're getting extra VPs. I think you always take it if you take Killmonger.
Yeah, unless you're just whatever reason maybe you have a game plan that's entirely focused on something else. But yeah, if you are taking Killmonger, then I think this is in your game plan and you should take it. Um, 2 VPs is just huge.
yeah, this card is stapled to Killmonger, and the two, I mean, 2 victory points is like pretty wild. If Killmonger had any element of control to him, I think he'd be showing up a lot more often in criminal lists because of this card.
Yeah. The only thing with it is possible that it does nothing, and that can be really bad, but it has so much upside that I think it's worth it. All right, then our final card is Vendetta, straight to D tier. Like this card is very, very bad.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, at least the one upside I will say is that it doesn't have a cost to it. Um, I mean, Drax gets this for free at any point. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
Like
I
the
think a
cost
couple
of this
couple
is you
other
can't
characters have that
take
as well.
something else.
Yeah,
It's like, why am I
yeah,
gonna burn a slot on Vendetta for a bad character? I mean, it's like just 3 power, right?
or yeah, you had 3 dice to an attack roll
Or
on
yeah,
someone
yeah.
that already hit you. So like,
Yeah. It's just
yeah,
it's rough. I feel bad for her because her 2 cards are bad and she's bad. Like it's just kind of a rough time to be a fan of Electra.
maybe we'll get a. I think she's too new to get a new version, but maybe they'll get an update based around the newer um, Daredevil runs where she's kind of taken up that mantle. So maybe
Yeah,
maybe she'll
let's
get
hope so.
reworked.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I don't know what they're thinking here. Like, Drax does this just on his character card.
Hmm.
Like,
yeah,
I,
Again for free.
yeah.
yeah.
Like I don't know if they were trying to make her awful. Like this is a card don't even take for fun because it won't be fun. It'll just be bad and you'll feel bad. So,
Yeah.
okay, guys, we've gone very long, but this was a ton of fun. I'm happy with our tier list. I love Criminal Syndicate. I know we all do. We love this game, so we just like talking about it. And I want to thank you guys for coming on and chatting with me for our very first video. So just give me your final thoughts on Criminal Syndicate or any upcoming tournaments or just whatever is going through your mind right now.
Yeah, I hope I don't have to play too many of these at Nova because they are good. They have so many options and very few of them are bad.
Yeah, go ahead and pull up all our three of our tier lists real quick just for everyone to see again here. I
Yeah, you got
really
the
like that we
characters.
did such a deep dive on the affiliation. I think when you're thinking about building your team, you choose an affiliation and you go from there. So I think this is a good format to talk
Yeah.
about. Um, Hopefully it was helpful to people. I really enjoyed it. Um, I think Criminal Syndicate, I think their biggest strength is their flexibility from their multiple leaders. I think they're a hard team to build on turn 0. It's really hard to just pick those 10 characters. You have to think a lot about your different matchups that you might get into, and then even in the moment, you're like, you have a lot of options when you're building your squad. So they're a high learning curve team, I feel like, but their flexibility is their biggest strength.
They really do have a high learning curve. And I always hate when I hear people say that they're just potatoes and they stand on points. There's so much more to it. Like, yes, you're ultimately going to stand on the point, but so is every other team,
That's kind of the
And
point.
like, right, exactly. It's like we have weaknesses that we need to work around. And that's the joy of really mastering this team is like, all right, I have some very obvious strengths and some very obvious weaknesses. how do I get around that? And it's like that's why I bring certain splash characters to help with big threats, or Nick Fury to move me around, Lizard for the extra movement. I bring in these tactics cards just to move around or deal damage. So play Criminal Syndicate. I mean, 4 leaders most of the game. There's a lot of content there. If you really learn the faction, it'll be a ton of fun. So, all right, guys, thanks again for joining me. Let's sign off. First video of Syndicate Gaming. Let us know how we did. Let us know if you want more deep dives, some shorter videos, but give us a like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. You know, we're like selling out now. So, all right, guys, I will see you in the next video.